Well, good morning, everybody. Um, I just figured I would do an addendum, another pre-farewell stream, if you will, two of two. This will be my last pre-farewell stream. The next one will be my last YouTube video. I seen something today that just bothered me because I know it's an untruth. It just rubbed me the wrong way, so I wanted to address it. It has to do with what video I seen had in it. Somebody said something that was patently false and not biblically correct either, and this person claims to follow Yeshua Messiah, but they said something that just wasn't true. They made the erroneous false claim that Mystery Babylon, USA, is not going to be invaded by China. And I'm like, what? What are you even talking about, dude? This person evidently doesn't understand anything about the military domain, international military affairs, or, just foreign nations in general and their deep intricacies. And they are not having a proper grasp on how the world works. I'm not a name dropper normally, so I'm not going to say this person's name. If people get around, they can figure it out. I just saw this today, as a matter of fact. So, going to address it by saying, what was said was that he said, no, don't worry, China's not going to invade America, and we have all these small arms here, which we do. But there's an issue with that because it's a deeper issue than just having small arms. The issue is more than that. It's a societal issue with all the rot and decay in society. There's a military factor involved in it, as in, communications, organization, proper training. You can have all the weapons in the world, but if you're not properly trained on them, then what good are they to you? They're no good to you. What are they going to do for you? They're not going to do anything. Beer gut Bubba with his, shotgun isn't going to run out and fend off the Chi-Com military at his mailbox. That's fantasy. It doesn't work like that. So all these small arms, and good morning everybody that's coming in. It's great to see you all. Yeah, this is my other pre-farewell stream. I have to do this. I have to, because what I saw today was so ludicrous. I had to address it. This individual, they're pretty intelligent when it comes to certain topics, but part of me wants to give them the benefit of the doubt that they just don't understand what they're even talking about when it comes to military issues, and as far as things relate to China and Russia and foreign countries and the different sets of elites that rule the different that run the different parts of the world, and how they're at each other's throats like rival mafia families. And there's a lot deeper. He has this very Western-centric point of view that these Western elites run everything, when that's pretty ridiculous, because we know, we just straight up know they don't run China. The CCP's been around before. So he made other crazy claims before, like the CCP runs, the CCP is run by Henry Kissinger, and I'm like, what? The CCP predates Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger wasn't even in diapers when the CCP came around, if anything, America's guy was what was that guy's name during World War II? Chiang Kai-shek was America's guy, and he lost the Chinese Civil War and fled to Formosa, also known as Taiwan. He doesn't understand the history of China. He doesn't understand a lot of the histories of these different countries in general, and how they came to be, and how these different elites came to be. He's not understanding these things, and he's not understanding that, in fact, it's actually more like China runs America. Look who owns all the property in America. It's China. They're the biggest property owner in the United States now. That's a fact. Also, China, it's a known fact. They've compromised most of our leaders. It's not the other way around. They've compromised our leaders by their MSS intelligence agency. This is a straight up fact. They catch them in compromising positions and hang it over their heads and force them to do pro-CCP actions or policies, carry them out, while they're being extorted by being caught in these compromising positions, doing things they ought not be doing. We know what I'm talking about. And also they bribe others, so they're either bribed or coerced into obeying the CCP and carrying out pro-CCP policies that weaken America and benefit China. That's a known fact. It's indisputable, irrefutable fact. Henry Kissinger does not run China. That's a bunch of bullshit. So, another thing is, though, let me get back on subject. I came on here to do this about what he said about all the small arms in America and that China's not going to invade. Well, for someone that claims to believe in Yeshua Messiah, they haven't read Jeremiah. Because had they read Jeremiah, then they would know that in Jeremiah 50 and 51, that we're invaded by massive foreign armies that our people don't understand their language. Well, gee, who could that be? Who has the population, the demographics, already the largest forces in the world between their regular military, their reserves, their paramilitary, which is the biggest in the world at 20 million. Yes, Welder Princess, Kings of the East, that's China. And if you want to broaden that, it's China and their Eastern Asian allies, whereas like the King of the North is Russia, but it's also like Russia and the CSTO nations. So it's like China in the more, specific sense is the kings of the East, and Russia is the king of the North. The king of the South could be some sort of, caliphate or like conglomeration of the Islamic countries. So, king of the South, king of the North, king of the East. Well, there's 10 kings in Revelation who reign with the beast. Those are your Eastern Eurasian kings who were victorious in World War III after Mystery Babylon USA is invaded, destroyed, colonized, occupied by the Chinese and the Russians and their allies. The Sino-Russian coalition in World War III conquers and destroys Mystery Babylon and plunders it. So they take us over. I mean, it's in the word, and reality is actually matching the word 100%. Because let me explain something about the small arms. You could put the small arms we have in the hands of people, but untrained people are not going to be able to do very much, if anything, with the small arms they're given. If you give small arms to people who are not organized, they don't have any effective communications to stay organized and be able to coordinate any defensive efforts. You don't have people with adequate heavy weaponry, no anti-tank missiles, no man-portable air defense systems to, fire at like helicopter gunships or low-flying ground attack planes who are like coming in on their, attack runs. You don't have anything like that. You just have people with small arms. You can only do so much with it. You saw in my audiobook how those things developed over time. At the very beginning, people were being slaughtered en masse because they were not organized. There was no cohesion. There was no communications. Remember, China knocked out the satellites that are right below the firmament, held up by high-altitude balloons. They knocked down all our satellites with their anti-satellite weapons. We're talking the FK-2000s, the Russian S-500s. They knocked down all our satellites. There goes your satellite phones, your satellite communications, your satellite data transfers. Next, or rather at the same time, I should say, it was a tandem strike between the anti-satellite weapons taking out the satellites and also, there goes your GPS, sat phones, everything. Then next, hey Mandy, then next, and Unorthodox and Miriam, everybody, and next after you lost your satellite communications, you had the tandem cyber attack, which took out your grid, which our whole grid is tied to the internet. Anything tied to the net can be hacked. So we lost the grid. We lost water. We lost power. We lost telecom. So there's your cell phones. We lost internet. So all that's gone. Everything's gone. You have no way to communicate. So you can have all the small arms in the world, but what good is it going to do you if you can't communicate, you can't organize? You don't have that many people in America who are well trained enough, who are already organized, who have caches of supplies stored away all throughout the wilderness for when they have to go and live in the wilderness. You just don't have that. Most Americans are coddled. They're weak. They're inept. They're not trained. They're obese. They're not in shape. They're not in any condition to fight. They're not organized. They're there's no cohesion, there's no professionalism, save for a very few, for a very tiny minority of people who have been to combat, been to war, people like me and others who have been to combat, been to war, had the training, served in the armed forces, whatever. There's a very small percentage of Americans that have actually had some sort of, battle experience, fighting experience, training, even if they hadn't been to war, at least had the training, There's very few of us, really. So all the small arms in the world, you can only do so much with them. Like in my audiobook, you've seen how everything developed from beginning to end. You saw how people had no idea what the hell was going on. You're literally taking a society of people going about their daily, everyday business. All of a sudden, bam, there goes your means of communication, your grid, your power, everything goes off. Most Americans panic when they've lost power or water for a few hours. Can you even imagine what it'll be like when the whole country has something like that happen? All the chaos, people without their meds, people without their ability to go shopping, people without all of these things they're accustomed to are going to panic. They're not going to be able to fight back, at least not right away, at least not effectively. They're not going to be able to communicate. So you're not going to have large groups of people getting together. Very large groups of people, save maybe in, areas where people already have a good rapport with one another. They can trust one another. They can actually manage to find other like-minded people, but that's a very rare thing. You're not going to see a lot of that. Most people are not prepared for a war on our soil. Americans are not the same people that they were back in, say, World War II. They're not the same people. Americans today are very different. They've not experienced the type of hardship that people did back in the day. The further back you go in the generations, the more resolute, the more tough people were, the more ability they had, the more strength they had to persevere through something like that. People today are just not like that. Look at this new generation coming up. Look at their value system. Look at what they, value in life. They don't have life skills. They don't have real life skills. They don't have the ability to communicate effectively. They're very there's a lot of arrested development. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. Arrested development. You have a lot of people in America that are going through arrested development where they're not, they don't have the social skills, they don't have the networking abilities, they don't have the life skills to be able to survive a war on our soil, much less something that's not even as bad as that, it's not as severe as that. When you lose all your communications, when you literally have, strategic heavy bomber aircraft, carpet munitioning cities, when you have ground attack planes coming in for attack runs and dropping munitions payloads on enemies that stand in the way of their armored phalanxes of tanks, of mechanized infantry forces, of anti-tank units that have heavy anti-tank systems like your Russian Terminator systems or your Chinese AFT-10s with these gigantic anti-tank missiles, these HJ-10 anti-tank missiles that have a 6.2 mile range, which is actually double the range of a TOW missile that we have, and it's more powerful too. These things are huge. When you have heavy artillery and rocket artillery saturating entire areas, or thermobarics like your Ch1nese that Russia has, or your Chinese thermobarics because they have their own MOABs that they can drop from their aircraft, that would just destroy whole city blocks. When you have these types of weapons, cluster munitions, flamethrower systems, torching things down, like you had in my audiobook with these Chinese paramilitary forces barbecuing whole city blocks, without consequence. People tried to fight back in the audiobook, but you saw what happened. They weren't organized. They were not well coordinated. They didn't have the right communications. They barely could communicate. And that was only through short distance, through runners and things like that. You could only do so much with that. When we lose our ability to communicate, when we lose our satellites, when we lose our internet, our phones, when electronic warfare systems, and China and Russia have some of the best electronic warfare systems on Earth, when they jam the radios you're going to lose radio communications. They're going to jam radars, radios, all of that stuff with their electronic warfare jamming systems. The Chinese have things like the KG-600 electronic jamming pods that basically, the same type of system causes electromagnetic interference, which almost caused 2 of our F-35s to crash into the Pacific, and that was a major embarrassment for the U.S. Armed Forces, so they tried to cover that up. Then you saw the Russians do similar in the Black Sea with the USS Donald Cook, not once but twice. They did it once in 2014, proven fact, plenty of articles about it. They did it again in early 2021, same place, same ship, same everything, except one time it was an Su-25 and the other time was an Su-24 with these jamming pods. These, I think it was not the Murmansk, it was their, I think it was the Kirkutsk system, because the Russians have the Murmansk, the Kirkutsk, and the Kabini electronic warfare systems that are capable of electromagnetic interference. These frequencies, you can do a lot with these different electromagnetic frequencies, and just frequencies in general, sound frequencies. There's all sorts of frequencies out there, but I'm talking about electromagnetic jamming. So they have these systems, and they're going to jam radios, radars, and just electronic systems in general if there's any redundant systems working. Like, say, how the Chinese put up their special towers around our missile silos. Yeah, why would they do that? So that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's to jam the redundant systems. So anyways, they also have their actual military electronic systems, like their portable systems, their vehicle-based systems, their air-based systems, their ship-based systems. So that's not, that we're not, those towers aren't the only thing, is what I'm saying. So basically, Joe Contreras, I hadn't seen you in a while. No, Joseph, you used to be pretty cool, man. Why are you talking all that shit, man? I'm not tweaking, dude. There's nothing tweaking about it. Anyone telling you that these things aren't going to happen is a liar, because they don't believe in their word. And they're not reading Jeremiah 50:51. They're not reading Revelation. If you think that, then you're the one that's tweaking, man. You're the one that's tweaking, not me. I'm just so bothered that there's so many liars out there these days. There's just straight up liars out there. People are trying to feed people lies, and it's usually these big channels. There's usually these big channels that are feeding lies. And they're trying to make people complacent. They're trying to make people overly comfy. And, they're trying to make people act. Yeah, if you don't like it, dude, you can always go, man. I'm just tired of people being deceived. And people are too easily deceived. There's people out there that talk a lot of shit about subjects that they don't know anything about, I mean, the guy that I'm discussing, I didn't name drop because I'm not, normally like that, unless I have to be. But the guy I'm talking about, he doesn't know anything about the military domain. He doesn't really know anything about China. He's talking out of his ass about China, saying a bunch of shit that he has no proof on. He won't offer any proof about that. But on these other subjects, he offers all kinds of proof. I think he should stick to the subjects he knows about, if that's the case, unless he's some sort of a shill or something. I mean, I'm not accusing him of that directly. I'm not saying he is or isn't, but I'm saying some of the talking points on those things, it's a little weird. It's a little weird, but, in a war and an invasion, when you've lost communications, when you've lost the ability to organize, yes, Alpha Armor, exactly. And that 1 hour in biblical time, that might not be a literal hour, because we don't know if it's meaning like in a few days, because sometimes in the Bible, when it says an hour, it can mean different things, it can mean different periods of time, because we know, like, when it's talking about the 7 days, it's talking about 7 years, that, when it says 1 hour, I mean, it could be a literal hour for the city of Babylon, but if we're talking about the nation of Babylon, it can mean something different, because in Jeremiah, it talks about the nation of Babylon being overcome by these massive foreign armies. And the reality is lining up. Well, yeah, it could be that even, Alpha Armor, but the reality in Jeremiah, and the reality is lining up with what it's saying in Jeremiah. Look, you see how China and Russia are positioning themselves China is the most powerful nation in the history of the world. The real facts, figures, capabilities, stats, numbers, everything lines up and proves it. They're the biggest steel-producing nation on the face of the earth. Their military-industrial complex is the biggest on the face of the earth. Norinco alone has 300 ginormous, these are mammoth factory complexes that took a long time to build. They started building these at the end of the 90s, and most of them came online. Most of them came online by the mid 2010s. We're talking like between like 2015 and 2018. These are huge complexes. Now, basically, we have one tank factory in Lima, Ohio. China has a handful. Norinco alone has 300 of these mammoth factory complexes that produce all sorts of things, from armor personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, main battle tanks, light tanks, shells, rocket artillery, the pieces, the artillery pieces, we're talking towed and self-propelled, and the rocket launching platforms themselves, plus the ammunition for them. They're building airdrop munitions, of course, for their aircraft. They're the biggest aircraft building nation because they also produce the most aluminum, 38.5 million tons of aluminum. That's the most aluminum production in the world, along with the most tungsten at 66,000 metric tons. The next biggest tungsten producer is Vietnam at 4,500 metric tons. Tungsten has a ton of military applications. Tungsten is used in anti-materiel bullets, in actual, for small arms. It's also used in sabot ammunition for tanks. It's when you get a good binding agent for tungsten, it's the hardest metal in the world, aside with depleted uranium, Du. It's in that category. It's in that class. It might even be tougher than Du. It's also used in armor for tanks. So China being the biggest producer, you only have to put a small amount in the RHA, the rolled homogeneous steel armor for the tanks, for it to be extremely strong alloy, for it to be able to resist all sorts of munitions, So when this guy is talking about, oh, America has all these small arms, China won't invade us, and blah, 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 I was like, yeah, bullshit. You don't know what the hell you're talking about, guy. Have you ever been to war? No. Do you have any combat experience? No, you don't. You know about physics and the sciences, and I think you should stick to that subject because that's what you evidently are knowledgeable in, but you're not so knowledgeable in world affairs. Study China in depth. You don't study Russia in depth. You don't study military affairs in depth, or else you would know that when you have a bunch of people with small arms running around, they get slaughtered by phalanxes of organized, highly disciplined, highly gung-ho, highly professional, well-armed troops with heavy freaking weapons and air support. They can call upon helicopter gunships. They can call upon armed drones. They can call upon cruise missiles. They can call upon airstrikes from ground attack aircraft, or even fighter jets armed with ground attack munitions. If they want to go that route, they can even get these aircraft to strafe the ground with exploding tip ammunition or armor-piercing ammunition, whatever's called for, whatever these aircraft happen to be armed with at the time of the mission. They can call in, heavier strikes like 200-pound munitions, 500-pound munitions, 1,000-pound munitions, 2,000-pound munitions, napalm tanks, thermobarics, whatever, air-to-ground missiles, whatever. They can call upon all sorts of weaponry to support the troops on the ground that are doing all the fighting. These phalanxes that are highly organized, highly grouped together, highly, they have 360-degree fire support, interlocking fields of fire, so that when all these idiots that don't communicate, that have all these small arms, are running around aimlessly, they have no communications, they have no recon or scouting assets to tell them where the enemies are, where they're coming from, or where they're even going, and what they're going for, what objectives they're after. When you have people that are deaf, dumb, and blind because the satellites are knocked down, because they don't have any radio comms, they don't have any telephone communications, they don't have any internet, They don't have any way to do active recon and make effective planning, or have the heavy weapons with which to counter these armored forces, or have man-portable air defense systems to fire and shoot down these helicopter gunships. You're going to have all these idiots running at these phalanxes of armored mechanized infantry swarms, getting machine gunned and, blown to pieces with anti-tank missiles or other heavy weapons, or 30 millimeter, because a lot of these Chinese infantry fighting vehicles have a 30 millimeter autocannon with blasting tip ammunition, which each impacts like a few grenades going off at a time, or perhaps armor piercing ammunition, which will shred like a Bradley into a trash can full of holes. I mean, that's a big round. That's a humongous round. The Bradley has a 20 millimeter gun, and that thing will rip some shit to pieces. Imagine what a 30 millimeter will do. These Chinese ZBD-04s have, or the ZBD-08s, which are allegedly have upgunned it to a 35 millimeter autocannon. Not to mention the main gun, which is 100 millimeter, which is almost like a damn tank shell, which will blow a Bradley into scrap. And you have phalanxes of these things, and you have idiot, people that aren't trained, that just have guns running around trying to fight these Chi-Coms, they're going to get annihilated. All the smart people in that scenario are going to be sitting back, getting organized. I'm talking about the people that actually have training and experience. They're going to worry about evacuating a hot zone, getting to the wilderness. That's like in all my work, I depict that. They evacuate first, get somewhere relatively safe as you can be in a situation like that. They start organizing. That's when you do that. That's when you start trying to figure out who has what skills. These people are good at medical. Okay, organize them into a medical group. Okay, these people have combat experience. Organize them into like a fighting group, a defensive group. Okay, these people are good with running. Put them in like a recon or scouting group or a messenger group where they run messages back and forth, so that people can communicate, since there's no radio communication, since there's no satellite phones, since there's no internet, since there's no telecom, we need runners. Okay? That's how that works. Idiots are going to run out there and get annihilated. No, it doesn't matter how many small arms are in America. It doesn't mean you're going to fight off an invasion from the Chi-Coms and the Russians and all their little buddies when they come and take us over, because that is in Jeremiah. It's in the Bible. If you claim to believe in Yeshua Messiah and you say that that's not going to happen, then you're lying, or you haven't read your word. You haven't read your Bible. So, I'm not trying to denigrate this guy because I don't know this guy from Adam, but what I heard I didn't like because it's not true. Okay? It's just not true. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm sitting here telling you facts about how these things work and how they would happen, how they would play out. You can't just, grab a small arms and just run out. It's not Call of Duty. You're not like running around and just shooting at stuff. It doesn't work like that. It's not how it works. You're going to run into very well-disciplined, very well-organized forces that work as a team, that work as a professional team. You're going to run into them, and they're going to annihilate you. So that's what's going to happen. So most of these Americans are coddled. They've never experienced hardship. They don't communicate. They don't know how to be organized and cohesive as a unit, as a force. They don't have heavy weapons with which to fight. Like, they don't have anti-tank missile systems. Do you see Americans with javelins in their houses, or tow systems that they can just sit in a wood line and fire at a tank going by or whatever? No, you don't know. We don't have stuff like that. I mean, you would, if you're going to think that a bunch of people with firearms is going to cut it. No, you have to have training or experience, or you gotta know what you're doing. You have to understand small unit tactics. You've got to know how to use your small arm. It's like somebody, take this for instance. Somebody with a lot of experience with a 30-30 versus a noob, an amateur, given one of these. Well, guess what? Guess who's going to win? The guy that has experience and understands his 30-30. Sorry about that. No, I was saying, if you have a guy that has experience with like a 30-30 versus a noob, you give a you give a semi-auto to, the guy with the experience with the 30-30 is going to beat the noob almost every time. Another thing, most Americans don't have head protection or body armor, you know? So when they're running at these armored formations of mechanized infantry and Chi-Coms who have body armor, who work as a team, you know, whether that's a stack team breaking into buildings and houses to raid them to look for people, or, you know, whether that's them doing like a commando raid on a large building, descending from fast rope from helicopters or whatever, you know, a bunch of noobs running around with small arms are not going to beat a team of gung-ho, well-trained, well-disciplined men wearing body armor, head protection, who know how to, you know, work in formations like wedge formations, diamond formations, staggered column formations, single column formations. You know, they know how to do fish hook maneuvers. They know how to do, you know, work as stack teams, moving down hallways, kicking down doors. You know, the whole gamut of different things. I mean, I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting. It's late. You know, but there's all kinds of things. I have it all in my community tab story reviews. You know, they're doing rolling shield maneuvers where they get out and follow behind in two columns. They follow behind their armor personnel carrier and use it as a shield if they're approaching a dangerous area. Or, you know, damn, my cat's about to throw up. Get down, get down, get down. Throw up on the floor, dude. Throw up on the floor. Okay, sorry. Yeah, they're doing a, if they're, you know, breaking off, because in an urban scenario, they have to go ahead of their armor to find enemies that do have anti-tank weapons, then that's what they'll do too. Like I say, if they have to like approach rubble piles and smoke out enemies that could be sitting in there with like a javelin or something like they did in my stories, you know, then they'll do that in an urban scenario. There's so many different tactics and times that they're used and times they're not used. You know, sometimes they use certain tactics in urban environments, sometimes they use certain tactics in more rural environments. It all depends where you are, what you're trying to do. You know, there's so many considerations and facets to these topics that people don't consider. It doesn't matter how many small arms you have. What matters is how they're employed and who's using them. You know, if you have a bunch of fat, obese, out of shape, lazy people trying to, you know, go fight people that are well in shape, well disciplined, well motivated, you know, well equipped, well protected, you know, guess who's going to win every time? You know, doesn't matter. You know, yeah, sure, you might have like numbers, you know, and you just might be able over time, even with like larger numbers, to whittle away at your enemy, but it still doesn't mean that you're going to win, and it doesn't mean that, you know, the enemy's not going to invade you just because you have small arms. You know, that's, you know, maybe in World War II that was a consideration to some extent, you know, for like Japan and Germany. Like if it ever came, say if Germany defeated the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa and was allowed to continue and ended up fighting us after they knocked Britain out next, you know, but they would have to defeat the USSR to come after us. Say if that happened and they went after us, yeah, the amount of small arms we had in our civilian hands might have been a consideration, because Germany would have remembered, hey, you know, we fought all these partisans in the Soviet Union that caused us all these trouble behind our front lines. You know, America would be a really tough country to invade. But nowadays, a nation like China's not Germany. China has 1.5 billion people, and they have the demographics to have an army that's freaking bigger than our whole country's entire population. Just their military-age males alone are bigger than the entire United States population. There's some 350-odd million Chinese military-age males. And that's not counting the military-age females, which are close. You know, they're close in number to how many military-age males. So you have 600 and about 70 million military-age people when you include men and women, and out of their 1.5 billion. That's just that demographic. But if you're just counting the males, even that's bigger than our whole country's population. The attrition that could be inflicted in a war, like say if it just was a war of attrition, the attrition inflicted on America from China in a war of attrition, we could never match them. We could never match them in people. We can't match them in industry. because they far outproduce us. I've showed that about 1 billion times on this channel. I've showed all the evidence of it. They outproduce us in everything that matters, and they outproduce us just in general. I mean, they have this mammoth war industry, the biggest military industrial complex on the face of the earth. You know, nobody can match it. You know, and Russia has a big military industrial complex, and they can't even match China's production. You know, they produce 1/3 on average of what China does. And if you're averaging out all the different vehicle types and what is produced, Russia produces 1/3 of what China produces. And China produces 6 times what we produce, which means Russia produces us by a factor of 2. They outproduce us 2 times. China outproduces us by 6 times. Both are allies. So then when you factor that together, we're already outproduced by 8 times if you factor Russia and China combined. So it's not possible. It's not possible for us to be able to fend off a country like China. China's on another level conventionally from everybody. So it's just not possible. And Russia with them, and Russia's big, but they're not China big, but they're pretty big. So Russia with China. Russia's the second overall most powerful country on earth, because when you factor all their factors together, all their resources, their size of their conventional forces and their abilities, their capabilities, their humongous nuke arsenal. China might not have as big of a nuke arsenal as them, but let me tell you what they do have involving their nuke arsenal. They have the most advanced means of delivery, and their nuke arsenal is the most modernized because it's much newer than everybody else's. You know, China became a nuclear nation in the 60s, early 60s. So their nukes are generally newer. They spent money to build newer weapons. You know, they in real numbers, because it's a state secret, when you take the number of missile silos, the average amount of warheads carried by each missile, the amount of fissile material China has had in the past 25 years, you know, the 2 to 4 tons of plutonium, 2 to 4 tons of plutonium, and the 22 tons of weapons grade enriched uranium, you know, that's enough for 1,200 nukes, but I go with the high median number, which is the most reasonable, because when you look at their silos, their mobile warheads that they have, like on TEL systems, which are their truck-mounted systems, the mobile warheads, you combine it all together, you get about 1,000. They have about 1,000 realistically right now. That's a lot. It's not as many. I mean, it's not as many as Russia or even we have, but it's a lot. It's definitely enough to wreck 2 large nations like the size of our country or Russia, because of how Russia's population is distributed in their country. You know, it's enough to destroy 2 large countries, which means they're still the world superpower, and they have the most effective means of delivery, because China has something that other countries don't have, that they've tested and fine-tuned a few times. You know, they've tested this a few times. They've fine-tuned it. No one else has tested this. You know, they have a fractional orbital bombardment system, which means all they have to do, they've basically taken hypersonics a step further than everybody else. China's technology is phenomenal. They're the leader in AI and robotics, directed energy weapons and lasers. You know, they're basically a world leader, you know, when it comes to creating miniature artificial stars. I've said all this. They've released them to show off, you know, their ability to harness energy off of these. If anything has a civilian use in China, it also has a military use, as per their civil-military fusion policy, which means that anything of a civilian use, whether it's properties, technologies, anything, even factories, bus and automotive factories, civilian aircraft plants, they can all be converted to military production. Not that they need to. They already have the biggest military industrial complex on Earth. I've talked about all their mammoth, humongous, ginormous factory complexes that put us to shame. We could never compete with China in production of military equipment or weaponry or anything. The attrition is just too much. I mean, China already has 40% of the entire world's industrial base. 40. It's not 20. It's not 30. You know, it's 40. They're the biggest industrial nation on the face of the earth, and nobody can touch that. They're also the biggest gold holding nation on the face of the earth. They have well in excess of 6,400 metric tons of gold, well in excess of that. Now, if you're taking gold by its true value in dollars, let's say, That's trillions worth of gold. We're talking several trillion in gold. Even if they partially back their currency with gold, they could never be broke. But they're doing the petro-yuan. You see that everywhere. The petro-yuan, that's a thing now. Now they're going to skim off of that like we did with the petrodollar. The Chinese have the biggest middle class on the face of the earth. They have 900 million people out of their 1.5 billion. They have 900 million that are considered well-to-do or middle class. That would make the equivalent of, let's say, 50 to 70,000 in U.S. dollars. So they have the biggest domestic market in the world. They do not need us, folks. They can sell junk to their own people. They don't have to sell junk to us. They can stop trade with us. It wouldn't hurt them. They have a massive domestic market. And plus, Russia is a big enough foreign market to really replace us, along with their humongous mammoth domestic market. China and Russia are both experiencing growth right now. The ruble's stronger than it's ever been, versus the dollar, I mean, the ruble has never been this strong, and this is after the sanctions. China's experiencing growth right now. You can go over to channels like, the Duran channel. They talk about all the economic data, I mean, there's other channels too, that want to tell the truth. China and Russia are a force to be reckoned with. And it's in the Word, it's in the Bible, and the reality is matching the Bible 100%. That should tell you something. Mystery Babylon has a civil conflict after a collapse. Famine. That equals collapse. If you have a famine, folks, you're in a collapse. Okay? Multi-way civil conflict. Okay, all the small arms in this country, like this other guy talked about, they'll be employed in a multi-faction civil conflict. In a scenario like that, it's a bit different than a foreign invasion. We've got these woke brigades, I mean, we don't have really a professional military. It's not like it was when I was in our military. It's gone to total shit. So in a multi-way Syrian-style internal conflict, much like I depicted and war gamed out in my own, scenario I made for it, with real factions, real groups, they have different names, obviously, in real life than they did in the hypothetical, because for obvious reasons, I mean, it's a hypothetical. But I mean, I take real aspects of real life and real facts and figures and use them to war game this situation out. I mean, obviously the leadership of these different factions were made up people. Of course, it's a hypothetical scenario, but the aspects of it, the socio-economic, socio-political, all these different aspects of it are real. These factions. I mean, you had the La Raza narco state. That's based off of all these armed cartels coming together down in Mexico and crossing the border freely and taking territory, during a time of American collapse. You had the Free American Army, which I modeled off of the Free Syrian Army, which is a group of U.S. forces that broke off of the regular military, but mostly the reserves and guards. But they also went to other factions as well. You had cults represented. You had everybody represented. You had ultra-nationalists and secular humanists represented in the form of the National Salvation Revolutionary Front. You had everybody represented in that. You even had regular conservative-minded people represented in the Northwest, the Northwestern Conservative Army. I mean, you had, Southern secessionists. I mean, you had Florida and Texas go. You had everything represented. That's all starting to happen now. You see evidence of it everywhere. Evidence of it everywhere. I put all this in these scenarios. I'm leaving YouTube because I'm tired of all the BS. I'm tired of all these big channels leading people astray and, selling false narratives and falsehoods. I mean, I've done my best. I've done everything I could here to try to show people how these narratives work and how to basically see right through them for what they are. You use the Bible to check everything. And if something doesn't match what the Word says, I don't care what kind of cult of personality somebody has or, what people think of a certain person. There's people that latch on to certain personalities and they think that, a certain person is so great and this and that, but they'll be telling you false things. That's the whole issue. Look at me. I'm just a man. I'm a war veteran. I'm a combat vet. I live in a house with 3 cats. I was injured in the Iraq War. I have seizures. I've brain damage from the region of my brain that was damaged from being in 2 vehicle blasts because we ran over anti-tank mines 2 different times and 2 different MRAPs. I was a gunner, so I got thrown around, hit my back, neck, and head on everything. I got originally on the tubes to try and share my knowledge, my experience, my research with people. Originally, I wasn't even going to go that way. It was just going to be a dream channel, where I put my end time dreams, and that would be that, but something told me to keep going, maybe it was God, maybe it was the Most High, maybe it was the Holy Spirit telling me to keep going. I don't know, but something told me to do more. Something told me to, reach out and help other people the best ways I could, the best way I knew how, which was by sharing my experience, my knowledge, my research, my abilities with other people that God gave me. These, I'm not my own. I belong to God. Even though I'm a screw up, I'm a sinner. I'm all these things, but I can admit it. Because if you really belong to God, you can admit to your shortcomings. You can admit that you're imperfect. You can admit that a real follower of Yeshua Messiah doesn't pretend to be holier than thou. I'm not holier than anybody. I'm not better than anybody. Nobody is better than anybody. Nobody's holier than anybody. I try to be humble like that. I try to admit that I'm not better than anybody else, and I'm not. I'm just a guy. I'm just a average guy, I'm an average guy with a small channel that's trying to help other people see what's coming, to see what I see, to see what's in the Word that I've seen. I'm sharing all of that with people. And if people want that, then, I'm glad. I'm glad I could help somebody. That's wonderful. I'm glad I could share my knowledge and experience with other people. I'm glad that some people are receptive to it. They want to use it to better themselves, to help themselves with what's coming in the future. I'm glad for that. I really am. I truly am. But it's time to get off the tubes, So this last video coming, I couldn't make this my last one. I had to make this an addendum to the last one because my last video I had a bit more planned. Like I had like a lot of different things I wanted to go over, like visual things, like different scenario type maps, and like to illustrate certain things like tactics and like certain scenarios that could be experienced insofar as like when an invasion happens and things like that. People just don't understand how armies work, how they function, all the mechanical, intricate details of them, and how ordinary civilians, even armed civilians, would fare against that type of thing. It's not an even match. Don't think it's an even match, because it's not. Our military's not ready for anything like that. Do you know that the Joint Chiefs were told that there has not been shelling on the level of what's going on right now in Eastern Europe since World War II? NATO hasn't trained for that. When I was in the Army, we didn't train to get shelled. No, we trained mostly for counter-insurgency warfare and to fight little tin pot dictators like Saddam. But I was there, after we defeated Saddam. So, America has fought little tin pot dictators, but we've never fought a major power since we last fought China and lost to them. I mean, I guess you could say it's a stalemate in a way. But China in the Korean War is the whole entire reason why North Korea is even a country to this day. North Korea owes China everything, and as a satellite nation of China, China controls North Korea. They still send them food and fuel to keep them afloat, to keep the regime afloat, the Kim regime. The Kims owe China big for saving their ass from us in the Korean War. Because North Korea is this little country, right? We defeated the KPA, the Korean People's Army, in the Korean War, pushed them all the way to the international border with China, where the Yalu River is the international border between North Korea and China. And by the time we reached the Yalu, China said, oh no, we're not sharing a border with a Western puppet Korea. No, we're going to save North Korea because we need a satellite nation. We need a buffer state between us and the West. So they came across the Yalu in their humongous numbers and forced us all the way back even a little past the 38th parallel, until we could establish some sort of cohesive, effective defensive line to hold them off. They routed us until we got back to the 38th parallel. We were on the run. Learn about the battle at Chosin Reservoir. Learn about all those battles in that area in North Korea as we were getting pushed back by the communist Chinese and how powerful they really are. And that was before China became this massively industrialized world superpower that has this Belt and Road Initiative branching around the world, is a main leader in the BRICS Plus nations, is the world leader in all this technology, had 5 to the G before us, which is a weapon. It can be used for a lot of things, really, but it's not a good thing, but they can use it for data transfers. They can use it for, cooking your skin. They can use it for making holograms. They can use it for all sorts of things. 5G is a weapon. Millimeter wave radars that are in the Chinese attack helicopters and everything else. It's a weapon, and they had it before us. They already have androids. They have android-type robots. That's how far ahead in robotics China is. China, South Korea, and Japan have the most advanced robots in the world. They have like android-level robots. China has the most advanced AI in the world. China controls a lot of our leaders. If they're not a threat, then whoever's saying that is high off their ass. I'm sorry, I'm just going to put it that way. They're high off their ass, and they don't know what they're talking about. China has Trojan shock armies inside our nation poised to strike out from their CCP properties that are their bases for their future invasion, for their Trojan horse shock armies. Anyone saying otherwise, to me personally, sounds like some kind of a CCP shill, because that's the same type of comments the CCP shills used to leave me. It's like talking points. I'm not accusing this person of that, but I'm saying the talking points sound similar. Oh no, China's no threat to America. You're a warmonger. Saying all these things. Oh no, Wei Fang would never say that about colonizing America. You're just, you're crazy and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. Right. I'm crazy. Like China doesn't have whole shill armies of keyboard warriors, just like every other major nation that's out there to try to discredit people that tell the truth. That's why I'm so shadow banned, because I'm right over the target. That's why my channel's been so heavily shadow banned. My numbers have been stagnated, which is mathematically and statistically impossible. It's impossible. Right. So I'm the one that's out of touch, right? Right. Okay, you keep believing that. So I said all that to say this, is that when you find people out there that just throw out these ridiculous blanket statements about topics that they don't know anything about, there's a lot of mis and disinfo, whether it's deliberate or not, and people have to be on their guard. That would be my parting words before leaving YouTube, is that, I'm a regular guy, just like other people out there. And there's a lot of these big channels that are trying to sway people or get people into a state of complacency where they're, like, man, no, this will never happen and blah, blah, blah. That's where they want you before. It's like a mouse trap with the cheese. The mouse is complacent and snap. Got him. It's that easy. Be on your guard. I'm not saying to live in fear. I'm not saying any of that type of shit. I'm just telling people that if you want to better yourselves, if you want knowledge, because God did say, my people perish for a lack of knowledge, then you may want to study the materials. You may want to get learned in that regard. You may want to really review the audiobook and see what those characters in these different areas endured. I showed an urban area. I showed a suburban area, like a mixture of urban and rural. I showed a rural area. And, I showed the American side. I even showed the enemy side. I showed the Chi-Com side of things. You may really want to, see all these different angles. I even showed what happened to people that were captured and ended up in Chinese Lao guys, because there's a lot of Lao guy futures ahead for a lot of people. because people are either going to get butchered or enslaved, or they're going to be free and they're going to be living out in the wilderness as nomads or semi-nomads, and you're going to be dug in underground like the Viet Cong, and you're going to be moving from place to place trying to stay out of sight. You're going to try and avoid all the recon drones, planes, satellites, of course, because you're going to want to stay under coniferous trees like your pine trees, to hide your IR signature, stay deep in the forest, or, say, if you live in the desert, find a cave system or something to stay in. I mean, there's all sorts of areas and places people can use. You just have to be resourceful. Even in my typed out stories, I showed the desert environment outside of Phoenix a little bit. I showed what they did there. They found a cave system to hide in. There's all sorts of things. People in cities hid out in underground areas like your subways, your sewers, your maintenance tunnels, your basements, everything, your sub-basements. I mean, there was all sorts of areas that people used to stay safe and stay out of the way of all the combat going on, all the airdropped munitions, all the rockets, artillery crashing down, all the missiles crashing down. I mean, everything, thermobarics, all of it, the whole nine. People found ways to survive, just like in World War II. In Berlin in 1945, when the Soviet troops were going street by street, block by block, house by house, Berliners hid underground in the subways to survive, to stay out of the artillery, to stay away from the, American and British heavy strategic bombers that were dropping, the carpet munitions all over Berlin, right as the Soviets were approaching and about to take the city. That was a hell of a battle. If you want to see what nasty, savage, all-out urban combat's like, the Battle of Berlin or Stalingrad or one of those types of battles is definitely something to, go and study. If you just want to see what the impact of a situation is on a civilian population, as well as the actual type of combat, modern urban combat, the tactics have become a little bit more refined, and there's better technologies, there's, better systems for, detecting your enemies, as well as, better tactics for going through homes, like stack team type tactics. Whereas in the World War II, the Soviets had like these shock groups, which basically, they didn't really do well as far as tactics, and there was a lot of friendly fire incidents, but they would like bum rush these buildings and, just throw grenades in and flamethrower, use on the top floors and things like that. I mean, if you watch some of these documentaries, you can see how they operated. I mean, it was a little less refined on the tactical end, but they were more of an attritional type of fighting force where they didn't really worry about their tactics as much as just throwing numbers into the fight. But nowadays it's a lot different. You have more professional forces, better forces. You have discipline. You have more refined tactics, like your stack teams for urban combat, going through buildings. Like we did all that stuff in Iraq. Kicking down doors. Doing stack teams into mud huts and buildings and things like that. I mean, that was just part of like what we trained for. Before I went to Iraq, we trained. Like relentlessly we trained before Iraq. I had about a year and a half of training before I went into Iraq with my unit, with 3rd ACR. We trained for about a year and a half. We did everything. We did mock urban combat scenarios at the Mount site at Fort Hood, which was called the Elijah Mount site. It's like this mock-up of a city where we did, building clearance operations, or stack teams and everything. Proceeding down streets as a team, and watching the tops of buildings and doing like, your rolling T maneuver where you had like guys watching the tops, you had guys watching straight ahead, and you had total 360-degree security, above and around, so you had men with interlocking fields of fire that could help the other guy if they got attacked from a certain side, So if you got attacked from two sides, you got people facing each side. Very, very refined tactics, things that our enemies will use on us. And that's what I'm saying. When you have civilians with guns that don't have any tactical training, they're going to get slaughtered, because you're going to have a well-disciplined, well-organized, well-equipped, well-trained, well-armored enemy, including body armor at the smallest level, at the level of a soldier. I mean, most Americans don't have that type of equipment because they've never invested in it. And that's why I've told people on this channel, go buy that type of stuff. You won't regret it. It's one of the best investments you could ever make. Yeah, okay, spend your $300, maybe 400, depending on like where you find it and what type it is. Go spend that money and you won't regret it. You might even spend as little as about 100 and something on some body armor set you found for sale somewhere, maybe eBay or wherever, and you won't regret that you did it, because now you're a little bit more bulletproofed than you would have been otherwise. It's worth it. Buy head protection, because in a situation like that where you have a lot of things flying around in the air, projectiles and debris, you're going to want something to protect your head, because you need your head safe. If something knocks you in the head hard enough, you're going down. Whether that's a piece of a brick flying in the air, or a rock, rocks flying in the air from the ground from something igniting, or something hitting a rock that ricochets or whatever. You need your head protected. There's going to be all sorts of things flying around. Same with your organs, your internal organs. You got to protect those. You don't protect those, you're going down. It's that simple. See, people don't consider these things, and that's why I had to make this video, because people just talk out of their ass and say like the most ridiculous things. And it's not even, it's not evidence based. It's like they don't know they don't even understand what they're even saying. They don't understand from the biblical perspective or from the reality perspective. I just went over about 1 billion times on this channel how and why, with evidence, China is what it is, and how it's going to come after us in the future, and why, what their ultimate aims and objectives are. This guy is sitting there telling you a patently false, a statement, because he doesn't even understand the CCP to begin with. He doesn't know the intricacies of the CCP. He doesn't know that they have really no ties to the West insofar as elites go, other than occasionally doing business with them. China is so old as a society, as a nation. Its leadership predate these Western leaders today. I mean, I'm talking about the CCP, and it's so asinine to make a blanket statement without any real evidence, to back it up, and you're just talking out of your ass about the military stuff. It's like, guy, dude, you don't even understand what you're even saying. Just because you have small arms doesn't mean you're going to make a difference. You could run out of your house with your whatever, your shotgun, your rifle. Some drone sees you, a spotter drone, like a quadcopter, and they call in a mortar strike on you. A mortar team with a mortar tube drop a mortar and thunk, there it comes, lands right on you, blasts you into oblivion, and you didn't even get to fire a shot. Or let's say, somebody else sees you, or a spy plane, and they radio in your precise coordinates when you stop somewhere to take a break, because you've been wearing all this equipment and you're tired and you need to stop and take a breather. Well, they radio in your precise coordinates, and they call a fire mission in on you because you've been waiting there a little bit too long, and a shell comes in and again blasts you into oblivion. Or they just saturate an entire grid square that you're in with rocket artillery, because rocket artillery can blast a grid square, a whole entire grid square, which is 1 by 1 kilometer area, into oblivion, and you're gone, and so is a bunch of other people. Or, they call in an airstrike on you. You didn't even get to fire a shot. See, these people don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about, because they don't know anything about how militaries work, how well coordinated they are, and everything like that. Sure, in an internal conflict, yeah, okay, a bunch of people with small arms might be able to do a little something, because we have this tiny, woke, depleted, hollowed out, demoralized shell of a military left that might break up in such a conflict. They might, go their own ways and join other different factions and take all their stuff with them. But it's not going to make a difference when China and Russia invade, because they're vastly more powerful than we are. Their war industries vastly outproduce us. It's not even a competition. So people that, it's also in the Bible. So people that claim they believe in the Word better be reading their Word and get it through their heads that this is Mystery Babylon and we are going to be invaded by foreign armies. So anyone saying otherwise is lying. So sorry, but that's just the way it is. Whether they mean to or not, it's not correct. So I thank everybody for coming. I've been going a good hour, so if anybody wants to say anything, I'll address it. Let's see who's all here. Oh, wow. Chat's been going a while. Glad to see everybody. Let's see. Hey, Karen and Miriam and Bang Bang Screwtube. It's a funny name. Good to see you. And oh yeah, don't starve yourself. Bang Bang Screwtube. Don't starve yourself. You gotta eat. You gotta have something that you can live off of. Don't ever starve yourself. It's not good for you. So let's see. Yeah. If you can do that, that's definitely good. The cloaking stuff, yes, yes. If you can afford it or find it, get that too. That's a very, very good thing to have. If you can get enough to camouflage an entire area, then do so. Like a living area, or like an entrance to like a tunnel system or a bunker that you have to dig for your supplies or yourself to stay in, like in my audio book, like the Viet Cong did. There's people are going to have to live like that for real, and that it'll be the survival of the fittest. I mean, the survival of the fittest and the survival of whoever God allows to live, because like it says in the word also, God will have mercy upon whom he has mercy on. Not everybody, even good people, even those who follow God, not everybody's going to make it. I mean, even followers of Yeshua, of the Most High, not everybody of them is going to make it either. I mean, when it's your time to go, it's your time. I just want to be there to help people make it a little further. You know what I'm saying? I want to be able to nudge people a little further on, help people get through and navigate some really bad things if they can do it. If they're in shape, if they're ready, if they have the knowledge base, then they can be mentally prepared for it. It's all about preparation. It's not about scaring anybody. It's about getting people motivated to get off their ass and, do something about their condition, about their situation. Go get supplies that you need. Be prepared to go nomadic out in the wilderness. You read or listen to my audiobook rather. Watch all my hypotheticals, because they're about as real as it gets. I mean, that's about as realistic of a wargaming, proverbially speaking, like wargaming out a situation. They're as realistic as it gets. I mean, very, hyper realistic. So, I mean, you should really, really pay attention to those. And I don't say that lightly. I say that, with a very firm, belief, that people should really pay attention to those and use that to build up your knowledge base, so that when things all go to shit, you know what to do already. You can get yourself out of that situation, that you're not going to freeze. Do you know how many Americans are going to freeze and seize up and freeze and not know what to do and panic? Do you know how many people are going to freeze up when it comes do or die? When you freeze up, you're a goner. I showed people so many things on this channel about survival, like counter sniper, counter mine, like landmines, anti-personnel mines, things like that. All these situations I've shown people how to survive and avoid and navigate around, get around. People don't use it. They don't use the material. They're not watching the community tab story reviews, which I did reviews taking segments from my typed out stories from the further back in community that people can still read if they have a PC or a laptop. It's easier to scroll back and read each part. But if you have a phone, it's a pain in the ass. But if you can still go back to those, you can read the typed out stories. Yeah, I had to misspell things on purpose so they wouldn't get taken down, but they're up there. If you understand how to read the abbreviations and the spelling, then you're well on your way to understanding what I wrote. But the audiobook, everything's plain as day. I'm reading to you. So nobody's using community tab story reviews, which is a damn shame. A lot of gems in there, a lot of very important, survival knowledge, really, through and through. I mean, a lot of things that can enhance your knowledge base and get you through a horrible situation if you pay attention to it. People aren't really, using that. They're not looking at my battle map scenarios. They're not really, listening to the audiobook. I mean, some people are, but it's, it's not really getting out there because of how shadow banned everything is. So, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. There's a lot of good things out there that people can be using to expand your knowledge base that most people don't have access to because they're being blocked the access to it. They're not being allowed to see it. These things will happen one day. well within our lifetimes. I'm not a date setter. I'm not going to say when they're going to happen, but I can tell you this much. In the Bible, which is what I go off of, the Word, because of my faith, my belief, my personal relationship with Yeshua Messiah, and what the Word says, I believe, because the Word predates everything. It's ancient. It's an ancient collection of books that have been around and been preserved, because God, who is all-powerful, will always preserve his word, and he will not let anyone disrupt it, at least not enough to where it would ruin its original meaning. Sure, it had to be translated from Hebrew to Greek to German with Gutenberg and his printing press to English. Okay, yes, there were translations. But when it was translated by scribes by hand, I believe that God would have imbued upon them, within them, the ability to do it for the most part correctly. Of course, God knows that human beings are fallible, as in we fail, as in we're sinners. We're not perfect by any stretch. But God, who is perfect, can guarantee that the original meaning of his word would make it through the ages to now. Those books are ancient. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were found in a cave in 1947 around the Sea of Galilee, those are ancient as well. It's a shame that they weren't found much sooner and put with the word. Same with the Apocrypha. It all belongs together. But even the Bible we have is enough. I mean, it's always better to get more, but the Bible is enough as a base of understanding, as a base of basic knowledge to help you understand God, who he is, who he stands for, what he stands for, who he is. That's enough of a base of understanding with all the prophecies in it. I mean, it's enough to help us understand who God is and what he stands for and what we should do as human beings to improve our relationship with him and to understand what's coming in the future. I'm just a man. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a prophet. I'm not any of that. I'm just a man. I'm a fallible, imperfect man. I have a soldier's mouth. I say crass words. I don't consider it curse words. There's no special secret book of curse words anywhere where it says lists words and says, oh, this is a curse word. No, that's a bunch of bullshit. Even Yeshua called people dogs, which back in ancient times, that was a bad thing to call people, generally speaking. Let's be adults about it. There's no little magic book, special book of curse words anywhere. So even so, those words can be considered crass. Crass is in like rough, words. Okay, yeah, I use crass sounding words, but no big deal. None of us are perfect. All we can do is try to further our personal relationship with Yeshua Messiah, with our Father, with the Holy Spirit, because none of us is perfect. And relating to God is a very personal thing. I would never try to force that on anybody else. When I talk to people on this channel, I feel that I'm generally talking to people that believe like I believe, So when I speak about the things I believe in, I'm not holding back, because this is my channel, and I'm sharing my life with other people. So while I'm imperfect, and I'm not a teacher, I'm not a prophet, I'm not a watchman, I'm not any of those things. I'm not so, arrogant or whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to ascribe a title to myself, other than the fact that, yeah, okay, I'm a Army veteran, I'm a combat veteran, but that's about it. And I'm a researcher, a deep researcher into certain topics, and my area that I stick to is the military domain and international relations domain, and the intricacies of these different regimes and their controllers, who runs these regimes, like how there's a difference between the East and the West, how they have different financial systems, how the banks in Eastern nations are controlled by the regimes, which means the elites are in the regimes in the East. In the West, it's different because the regimes are puppets of the banksters, because the banks are privatized. That's different. It's all about who controls the currency. In the Eastern nations, the regimes control the issuance of currency. And that was how it was supposed to be in this country when it was founded, but that didn't happen. So you have these differences between East and West. There's two different systems. The East is the BRICS Plus nations. They're already working on creating a one world BRICS Plus currency, whereas the West is trying to build its own, the IMF. The IMF one world currency. You see, They're two competing systems, and they each have their own plan for an NWO, but there can only be one. There can only be one, and we know who's going to win, because World War III is the catastrophe that it's going to take for there to be this one world order. It has to be something so destructive, so hellish, so maniacally just nihilistic and life-ending that it would make the survivors turn to someone who's going to promise them a better future. Now remember, in Revelation, there's your 10 kings. These are your 10 kings who give their power to the beast and reign for 1 hour with the beast in biblical timing. 1 hour could be months, in my estimation. So this doesn't last very long, this one world system. But this is after World War III, okay? Your 10 Eastern Eurasian kings, especially China and Russia being chief among the 10 kings, are they who run this one world order, They give their power unto the beast, because the beast doesn't have any power of his own. He doesn't have any power. He's just a man who's a con artist, a swindler, who gets in there and he says, hey, if you guys give me your power, your industrial might, your armies, your financial backing, your economic backing of your nations, China, the world superpower, is the muscle for the beast. So is Russia, so is the 8 other Eastern Eurasian kings who were victorious over Mystery Babylon in World War III and its Western allies. Where goes Mystery Babylon, so does its allies. And when America's no longer around to protect Israel, that's when the beast makes his covenant with them after World War III, because Israel is threatened by these 10 Eastern Eurasian kings because they've defeated the West and they're coming for Israel. So the beast steps in, makes his covenant with them, and then he breaks his covenant with them halfway through the trib. That's what happens. So, anybody that's saying that Mystery Babylon won't be invaded is a fool. They haven't read the word. They don't understand what they're talking about. They just don't get it. They don't understand how militaries work. They just don't get it. They don't understand that a bunch of random civilians with guns with no communication, because the satellites were knocked out of the sky because the cyber attack came, they think that somehow they're going to fight off the Chi-Com army. It's lunacy. Total lunacy. Total lunacy. And I got to plug this in or it's going to die. Let me get my ashtray. I'll be right back. Sorry, y'all. This is a bit of a casual stream today. I don't care anymore because I'm getting off YouTube. I don't care about, formalities. Because I'm getting off YouTube. I'm done with it. I've done all I can do. I've said all I can say. I might be a guest on other people's channels if they want me there, but I'm mostly done with the tubes. I've done all I can do for people. I'm just an average guy, like so many others. I've tried to help people. People can take it or leave it, what I've done here. So if people want to, there's all kinds of work on this channel to help, So I hope people will use it and, use it to better themselves. Because that's what it's there for, So take everything seriously, but don't be afraid. Never be afraid, because remember, we all have a time appointed to us with which we're going to go, with which we're going to leave this world. So when the invasion comes, a lot of people, they're going to leave the world. And unfortunately, many Americans have not made peace with him, with the Most High. And they need to. They need to accept Yeshua Messiah before it's too late. Because when it's too late, it's too late. And unfortunately, people don't take the future seriously. They think, everything's going to be happy-go-lucky like the Jetsons. No. We have a Stone Age future ahead of us, folks. We have a Stone Age future. We have a Flintstones future, like I always say. They're going to come in and carpet munition this place to oblivion. They're going to pillage and plunder this place. They're going to take a lot of people as slaves and Lao guys. And they're going to genocide and organ harvest many others, like a Holocaust-level organ harvesting for the CCP, because they make a lot of money off of that. They're going to use a lot of women in the flesh trade, and you know what I'm talking about, bordellos and such. Of course, there's going to be partisans who try to resist, just like in my audiobook and all my work, but it won't be to any avail. I mean, it'll just be to defend yourself, more or less, to be able to stay free. I mean, I'm just trying to help people navigate all of this. It's real. I know how real it is, because I've been to Iraq, and I can imagine what's coming here to make Iraq look like it was nothing but a training day. What I did in Iraq was nothing but a training day compared to what's coming here. They said that, like I said earlier, they said that the shelling and rocketing in Eastern Europe is so intense it's not been seen since World War II. Anybody making light of that is a damn idiot. You have people over there literally documenting it, how horrible it is. It's on film. People are saying, oh, alleged war. Bullshit. No, it's real. People are being shelled and they're dying in humongous numbers. Casualties over there are massive. In fact, I have a friend here on the tubes. I'm not going to say her name, but, you know, we'll just say this. People know people that have been there. I'll just put it that way. People know people that have been there. It's real. Can you imagine a society like ours going through something like that? Our little coddled, weak society going through something like that. I was field artillery in the Army. We got to do our artillery missions every so often. You know, most of the time they used us as mechanized infantry forces. Because of the nature of the fighting there, you know, I got to do artillery missions some of the time, but not all the time. But when we did, man, we blew some things to shit. It's real. We've given most of our artillery to them. Half of all our rocket artillery ammo, 270 millimeter MLRS/HIMARS ammunition has been given away to them. Half. 2/3 of all our shells, our howitzer artillery shells, 155 and 105, have been given to them. 2/3 of all of them. We never had a whole lot of shells. I mean, we had a decent amount, but you got to understand, Western militaries are built basically to fight counterinsurgencies and overthrow tin pot dictators of small countries. We've never been able or ready to fight a large nation like Russia, and especially not China, on conventional terms. China now is the biggest navy on the face of the earth, the biggest subfleet out of that biggest navy and biggest surface fleet. They have the biggest strategic missile forces on the face of the earth, even though most of those cruise missiles and ballistic missiles are conventionally armed, but they're still extremely deadly. They still have a lot of nukes. I mean, they're the third biggest arsenal in real numbers, real terms, but they're conventionally armed missiles, and combined with their nuke missiles, their ICBMs, they have the biggest strategic missile forces on Earth, biggest navy on Earth, biggest army on Earth if you take their active duty and reserves, biggest paramilitary on Earth, which is a parallel military force. The Waffen-SS in World War II, the Iraqi Republican Guard in the Gulf War, and in the second time around, you know, when we actually invaded, those are paramilitary, and they were heavily armed. So China has the biggest paramilitary forces on the face of the earth, 20 million, divided between their PAP, which is their People Armed Police. It's all in the name. Armed police, like militarily armed and trained, like the Waffen-SS. They also have their National Militia, which is like their like National Guard, but paramilitary, like a parallel military National Guard type entity. They have their Marine Militia, which is also pretty big. It's like a Navy unto itself. It's like a mix between like the Navy and our Marine Corps Reserves, I guess you could say, because it's like a home defense, like coastal, littoral, naval and infantry force, like light infantry force mixed together. Then you have the National Construction Corps, and you have the PLA Strategic Reserves, not the regular Army Reserves, Strategic Reserves, which are like for home defense. They go under PLA command in a time of war. I've read like Chinese documents translated to English insofar as like how their military mobilizes and everything like that. I mean, I've read all sorts of things out of the CCP's own mouth. I mean, a lot of people don't study them. I study them. I study their behavior, their desires, their plans, their ultimate aims and objectives. They have their own elites, their own billion and trillionaire elites in the CCP regime when they're upper crust. So does Russia. They have their own political oligarchy. India has its own elites. I mean, Iran and North Korea, Pakistan, they all have their own elites, separate from the West. Middle East has their own elites as well. Uber rich oil tycoons and whatever else. They all have their own aims, their own objectives for power and greed and domination. And they're cutthroat. There is no love or honor among these people. They will knife each other in the back and shake hands the next day. And they'll do it over and over until they get ahead. They'll step on each other's backs to get what they want. They don't give a damn about each other. They don't give a rat's ass about each other. And they don't give a rat's ass about the little people. We're expendable to them, to all of them. It doesn't matter which country, which set of elites, Eastern or Western or otherwise. They view all of us as expendables for use in furthering their own power. And the CCP has had plans for its own world domination. Belt and Road and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all these other, entities that they've created, the BRICS Plus, all of it, is just a way for China to wrap its tentacles around the world. The CCP, rather. I don't have an issue with the Chinese people. I'm against the CCP that rules them because it's an evil, godless, secular, humanist, despotic police state regime. And they have the worst, nastiest designs on our country and its people. They want you to be a slave, dead, or organ harvested. And that's the reality of it. I'm sorry. I mean, I hate to be so blunt. But that's why I made a channel. That's why I've taken it to where I've taken it. And that's why I'm getting off. I'm done. I've said everything I can say. Well, I mean, there's nothing else I can say that really has to be said, I mean, I'll still do community posts. I'll still be around to answer, questions or take comments on old videos or whatever, community posts. I'm not like gone, but I'll be around. I might be a guest on other shows if people invite me, whatever. But for the most part, I'm basically done. I'm done on the tubes. I've had enough. I mean, I've done everything I can do. I'm basically done. My next video is my last video. I just had to do an addendum because that rubbed me so wrong that somebody would say something so blatantly untrue, something so false. So it's just ridiculous. All the lunacy that's out there, all these false narratives and people that, espouse false narratives and push false narratives. They try to pimp it and push it, and people fall for it. People fall for all these narratives all the time. They don't listen to ordinary people that go out there and put everything on the line to, tell a truth or share something with others, their experience, their abilities, their education, their knowledge, what have you. No, they listen to these big channels that are either funded by, special interests or regimes or whatever else, It's a shame, and they'll let people push all kinds of false narratives without evidence, and it's just people just don't care, I mean, thank you, Bang Bang Screwtube, thank you for saying that. I saw your message, but it's not letting me see everybody else. I don't know what's going on here. It's messing with me. I don't know why it's doing this. Let me go back to this top chat. Dang, what's going on with this thing? Anyways, let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, Karen. Yeah, it's a good idea. If you can, try it. Definitely try it if you can. Yeah, oh, speaking of the Marine Corps, our Marine Corps had an exercise. I think it was out in, what was it? Camp Pendleton, where they had like our woke allies beat them so bad in this exercise, down to the last man. They got everybody. They got all our Marines to the last man. They had to reset the whole exercise because our Marine Corps got beaten by our woke allies. It's a bad, bad thing. That's a sorry state to be in. You know, Marines are supposed to be, you know, pretty effective. I mean, let me tell you, in Iraq, we sometimes encountered them. You know, they're just like the Army. They were just like us in terms of, like, capabilities on land. I mean, they did the same things we did. You know, they weren't any better or any worse than we were, you know. I mean, we respected each other. You know, they're just a different branch, you know, but it's so different now. It's so different now. The Army's not the same. The Marines aren't the same. The Air Force, it's all gone to total absolute shit. They disbanded a whole Patriot battery, a battalion rather. They disbanded a whole Patriot battalion and sent it to the Eastern Europe, and it got destroyed because those allegedly leaked documents, you know, are claiming that, you know, their air defense in that country's totally gone to shit and they're not going to hold out much longer. Well, we already knew that. I've been telling people that for months, you know. Russia's been using a limited incursion and they've done a massive buildup. They haven't pulled the trigger on it yet on their massive forces they've built up, but when they do, it's over. You know, they've been using small forces to basically pin down their enemy and just meticulously, you know, relentlessly shell them into oblivion. It's very real. And that type of shelling and rocketing hasn't been seen since World War II. Now, China and Russia are roughly equal in terms of artillery numbers. I've gone over all the numbers before for everything, for everybody, so everybody already knows all this. But China and Russia have so much artillery, I mean, it's insane. You know, like, our artillery cannot compete with theirs just out of the sheer numbers they have. I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, it's ridiculous. When I was in field artillery, our artillery doctrine was basically, you know, we were like a support element for, like, the armored forces in 3rd ACR. It's like, you know, they would call for fire from us and we would, you know, hit things that whatever got in their way. I mean, it was very, like, pinpoint type doctrines where you get a specific target. You know, it wasn't like area shelling normally. I mean, we didn't really expend rounds like that. I mean, you know, there might be every now and then an occasion where we would, you know, do a lot of area denial here and there, but we didn't do it a lot because we normally kept our shelling to, like, pinpoint strikes, you know, like we shelled for accuracy on targets, and every so often we rarely would do a area denial mission, but most of it was like, you know, illumination missions and, you know, pinpoint strike missions. I think one time we fired we fired a satellite-guided Raytheon round. You know, it was like a first, you know, back in 2008 we did that. It was like allegedly we were like the first, you know, unit to fire one of those, and you know, we did all kinds of things, but the type of artillery doctrines that Russia and China have, they do so much area shelling, like they saturate whole areas with shells, like relentlessly. Like you see how many shells Russia uses in a day, 20 to 50,000 shells a day. Since the beginning of the war, they've expended well in excess of 4 million shells by now. We've given them about 2 million shells out of our roughly, I think we had 3 million total. And that's why we've had to go to the Middle East and North Africa to pilfer for shells. That's why we raided that shell depot in Israel, the joint U.S.-Israeli shell depot, because we wanted to give it to the proxy country so that they could keep going, and they're running out of shells. They're running out. So, you know, it's, well, Welder Princess, that's better than nothing. Your dirt team thing, I mean, that's better than nothing. I mean, if you can, like, match that sort of thing with carrying, like, a firearm and entering rooms and stuff like that, you basically, it's probably close to stack team doctrines, but, you know, I mean, you got at least, that's better than nothing. I mean, you probably learn a stack team type tactical training pretty quick if you already have that under your belt. That'd be like your next step. Hey, Jason, or Yeeson Garcia. I've been chilling, man. I've been, spending time with, people important in my life, and been, taking a lot of off time from here because when I do my last stream, I want it to be really good. I don't want to, I don't want to leave anything unanswered or anything undone that needed to be done. I want everything to be crystal clear. I want it to be in depth. I want it to be uh, on target with all the important, bullet points I have to discuss, like as far as like explaining how the draft wouldn't work and why it's not going to work, sort of like I did in my last video right before this one, with all these details. I would go in more depth with it all. I wanted, I want everything wrote down. I want notes. I want everything to be perfect. I want illustrations for certain things, like when I go over certain types of scenarios. I mean, I want it to be perfect. I don't want anything left unanswered. I want everything to be basically, on point to where everybody understands and everybody has good reference material if they have to go back on it. Yeah, Joe, gotta go. I know you had some bad tornadoes. I hope you're all right, man. I hope everybody up there is okay. Yeah, it's good. I hope everybody's good. I mean that's a nasty situation. Storms, they just go through and rip things up. Yeah, it's. Let's see what else. Well, that was a hell of a chat going today. A lot of discussion. Well, thank you. Thank you, Bang Bang ScrewTube. I just, I had to come on and talk about it because this man just didn't understand. He didn't know what he was talking about. It's like, dude, what are you even saying? Like, you don't understand the intricacies and all the finite, like, small details and mechanics about how militaries work and how civilians that are armed would be affected by such a thing. You just don't get it, man. It's like some of these people, they drive me up the wall with this asinine shit. It's like they try to spread things that aren't correct. It's like I don't get it, man. It's just I don't get it. They say all this asinine stuff that just doesn't match the reality on the ground. They make blanket statements about subject matter that they know little to nothing about, and then they run with it. They don't give any, evidence on it. Like, they don't war game it in their own mind. Like, okay, like how would this work if you had a bunch of people running around with small arms without training, without expertise, without any knowledge, I mean, without tactical training or experience, like you're going up against people in armored vehicles with heavy weapons, heavy machine guns, anti-tank missiles, flamethrowers, main guns, like, we're talking like 100 mm plus sized guns, also 30 mm autocannons or larger. I mean, you're talking going up against all these heavy weapons and getting shredded, annihilated, shredded hunks of human meat that get thrown around to where you can't even identify a body because they've been shredded up by all these munitions and rounds. 12.7 mm machine gun ammunition. Just if one of those hits your chest, it'll like rip your body almost in half, depending on how close you are to it when it impacts. It'll go right through body armor because it's a big ass round too. I mean, we're talking things like that. There's no real, like, I'm thinking about it in my mind about how nasty it is, and there's no real way I can quantify it or explain it because a lot of people just don't get how serious it is and how destructive those weapons are. Hey, all smiles. I'm just in the middle of a live. I didn't think I'd be going this long. I'm talking about very serious topics here because I've encountered a video yesterday that really rubbed me wrong, and it just all the way wrong because it's not biblically compliant, and this person in this video claims they believe in, Yeshua Messiah, and, they said that China wouldn't invade us. I'm like, bro, what are you even talking about? What are you saying? You are leading people astray, and you've not read Jeremiah 50 and 51, Revelation. You're going against all of that when you say that. We are absolutely going to be invaded by China and Russia. People that say that we're not, They're not telling the truth. They're incorrect. Not only from a biblical perspective, but from a reality perspective. They don't understand the way these CCP elites think and what their aims and objectives and goals are, the designs they have on this country. Not only to be food independent, because they're going to use this country's arable farmland to become totally food independent, because they import a lot of food and they don't want to have to do that anymore. They want to be completely food independent. They want our resources too. They even want our people as slave laborers and more, organ harvesting and, the rest, bordello women and all that. They want all of that. So it's like they're not, like, people don't understand the intricacies of these CCP plots and what their objectives and goals and aims are and plans are for our people and this land. And they're going to say things like China's not going to invade us. And I'm like, how do you figure that? You're not even offering evidence for it. You're just talking out of your ass. I mean, no offense. I mean, sorry, but what you're saying is not even biblically compliant. You're just saying things. You're not offering any proof about your position on why China's not going to invade us, and trying to tell people that Henry Kissinger runs the CCP is lunacy, because the CCP predates him when he was in diapers even. I mean, the CCP is older than him. So saying that is lunacy. America has no connection to the eastern elites of China whatsoever at all. We've done business with them. And when Kissinger and Nixon opened up the doors to China in the 70s, remember that time, the 70s, not before, in the 70s is when we opened the door to China. That was when they sold us out to them. And they started to send our industry over there, which China used because it was on their soil. They copied our industry. They took from it. They built their own industry from it. And they grew themselves at our expense. While we deindustrialized, China massively industrialized by taking all our industrial secrets through industrial and academic and military and other espionage forms. They've had the most wide-reaching branch of espionage ever seen in human history. And academic espionage is how they've gotten all this technology, and they've used it to build themselves up and then leap ahead of us to where now they're building androids while we're still stuck with like these primitive robots, like Atlas and, the dog robot. That's a common thing in China. That's like a common robot, but they've got androids. They've got things way more advanced than that, while we're stuck with that. China, South Korea, and Japan have the most advanced robotics, and China has the world's most advanced AI. They can monitor all their people with their AI. That's why China is a prison state where all their people are good little worker bees and obey the CCP regime, because they're constantly monitored by the CCP master AI. So basically, Xi Jinping, these Western elites, after the West is destroyed, will be Xi Jinping's footstool, just like Emperor Valerian was a footstool for the Persian emperor once the Romans lost to Persia. Yes, the Persian emperor kicked up his feet on the back of Valerian, the former Roman emperor that was captured by the Persians, and he also used him as a stool to step on and mount his horse. So the same thing is going to happen to these Western elites. They will be humiliated after they're finally defeated. You have to understand, they're like rival mafia families now, these Western and Eastern elites. So only one can prevail. They have two competing systems. The West is trying to do their digital currency and their little IMF one world currency. In the East, the BRICS Plus is trying to do their own currency, and only one can prevail. And right now, the war in Eastern Europe is a showdown, essentially, between East and Western elites. But the problem is that, okay, Ukraine, damn, I said it. Okay, well, that country was picked as a proxy for the West, to fight Russia, which is an Eastern nation. They're an Eastern stronghold nation. So they picked them as a proxy to fight Russia, okay? Because Ukraine had the strongest armed forces that they could use as a force to fight Russia, because no nation in Western Europe had been strong enough militarily to fight Russia, because NATO is not strong enough to take on Russia. all these Western European NATO nations, I've read the numbers before many times between their equipment, all the numbers of tanks each country has, different artillery pieces, your towed, your self-propelled, your rocket artillery. I've read all the numbers. I've compared them, how many troops each nation has, and plus the level of professionalism between Russia and Western European nations. There's no competition. Russian troops are far more professional than Western troops. And ours too now, because we got this depleted, hollowed out, thinned out, demoralized, woke military new generation of like arrested development kids that don't know how to communicate. They have no social skills. They have high anxiety. They couldn't handle massive shelling that Russia and China would deliver. They'd be like curled up like this. You'd have them curled up like this. They'd be in a ball in a trench somewhere, praying and hoping that the shelling would stop. They're not. NATO doesn't train for massive shelling. I've told people this. When I was in the armed forces, we didn't train to get shelled by our opponent. We trained to be the ones delivering the blows. Like I said before, my artillery unit didn't even have a counter battery radar. Like most artillery units have them. I don't know why ours didn't have it. We didn't have one, but we were training to basically fight insurgents, guerrillas, partisans, whatever you want to call them, in Iraq and Afghan. Not only that, but also tin pot dictators, like Libya, like your Gaddafi, your Saddam, your Mullah Omar in Afghanistan. All these little, shit tin pot dictators don't have shit for militaries. And, even, Afghan didn't even have an air force. You got Mullah Omar with no air force down there, it's like I said before, okay, you got America that's, had all these, overthrows of these regimes, these little tin pot dictators. We haven't really fought a major power since the Korean War and World War II. And when we won World War II, we did it with the help of the Soviets and the British. And Britain and the USSR, Britain was much stronger than it is now back in World War II. They had a whole empire that they could mobilize resources from, like they had India, they had, all these African territories, that they could mobilize resources and troops from, whereas basically, nowadays Britain is by itself. It's just the island, a United Kingdom. You got your England, your Scotland, your Wales, your Northern Ireland. That's the Britain of today, and they're not that strong. The whole British military wouldn't even fill up a football stadium. That's how small they are. We're talking like grand total, reserves and everything. It's like 90,000 troops. That's nothing. The Germans, I think they're like 200,000 with reserves, but without it's like 120,000 strong, their military. It's not big anymore. At the end of the Cold War, when East and West Germany reunited, Germany on paper had a lot of equipment between East and West Germany merging, and then they had a lot of troops. Like I've said before, we had a conscript army in Vietnam, and they did what they could. They fought their best. They were okay. Like if the German conscript army with all that equipment had to fight back at reunification, they would have been a force to be reckoned with then. But now, not so much, because they sold off all that equipment. They gave it all away. Now they've got nothing left to show for it. They're really weak. There's jokes that I've heard that, the whole German army would only be able to defend one town. Like the whole concentrated force of the Bundeswehr together would only be able to defend one town because it's that small and pathetic. And I've heard colonels what was it? McGregor and Scott Ritter say that the Europeans can't even get their troops out of the barracks. They're so bad, right now. And then, America's going that way too. It's heading that way. It's also pretty bad. Our Marines got beat by our woke allies. We lose every single solitary war simulation on the Pentagon's own supercomputers to Red China. We lose the NATO war games, the actual war games where they game it out, where all the militaries come together and game it out in Europe. We lose to Russia. We lose bad. And Britain and France exhaust their entire stockpile of artillery howitzer shells in 8 days. That's all it takes, 8 freaking days, and they're out of shells, And people just don't get it. It's like they just don't get it. It's I don't even know what to say. It's like Europe and the United States cannot defeat Russia, let alone China. And people are saying, you know, oh, China's not going to invade us. We have all these firearms. Bullshit. Bullshit. It doesn't matter how many small arms you have. It matters who's using them and how they're used, and if there's training, experience. And most of our population doesn't have any experience. I mean, you know, or training, really. I mean, I guess you could lump that in. I mean, more, I guess you could say more have the training than the experience, but it's still a small percentage when you combine it. Then you factor in the level of artillery that would be used here. Just like what's going on in Eastern Europe. Hadn't been seen since World War II, right? Okay, well, imagine that here. When our cities look like Berlin in Nazi Germany in 1945 with the Soviet troops going door to door, house to house. Oh, wait, I wargamed that one in my audiobook. That's in my audiobook. The Cap City Battle. Where everybody's hiding out in the metro subway lines. And, you know, there's carpet munitioning, and, you know, whole areas of the suburbs are getting, you know, laid waste to, razed to the ground, you know, by artillery and carpet munitioning and, ground attack planes swooping in to hit the, you know, defensive lines where they had made a defensive belt around the regime quarter to try to protect it. You know, they only held out for like 3 days and it was over and they surrendered the country. I mean, you know, CCP properties, they can launch these invasions, you know. I mean, they have properties all over this country. They're the biggest property owner in America. They can hide all their heavy weapons inside of barns, pole barns, greenhouses, like those little greenhouse things. You know, you can hide all sorts of stuff in there. Put tarp over it inside of it. You can hide whole battalions of armor, you know, and mechanized infantry units and anti-tank units with heavy anti-tank weapons and anti-aircraft units like air defense units, you know, your air defense missile systems and, you know, missile batteries and the people that use them. I mean, they could be walking around in civilian clothes. You don't even know it. You don't know they're foreign troops. Ch1nese students, they have to have been a member of the armed forces or the paramilitary and had that training to be able to get the exit visa to come to other foreign countries, including ours. There's 5 million Ch1nese students in America. 5 million. How many of those are Trojan shock armies? Begs the question. How many of those have a muster and assembly point on CCP regime properties? Begs the question, doesn't it? What about these externals that are out in Canada and Mexico, based in the Ch1nese Bahamas base, the ports, in Cuba and in Venezuela and Nicaragua, Mexico, Canada. They're all over North America. They've been seen, folks. China built roads in Mexico to their jumping off points for the external troops, you know, from their bases in Mexico to their jumping off points. The paramilitary and maybe even the military, but usually paramilitary because they can disguise themselves as civilians better. They would you know, be like more looking like an actual construction company, you know, built those roads to their jumping off points along the border with us to assist the Trojan shock troops already inside doing the heavy lifting, capturing the cities, infrastructure, towns, installations, everything. You know, of course they go for installations first, along with cities, big cities, medium cities. Then they work their way down to small. They'll secure the infrastructure like the roads. 4 million miles of roads in this country, but of course they would secure the interstates and major roads first, work their way down to small roads. You know, that's just the way it works when you invade a nation. You know, of course, you go for installations, infrastructure, big cities, medium cities first, roads and all that first. Secure all that, then you fan out into tertiary regions, and then you start securing all the smaller stuff. That's the order it would go. So all these CCP properties that are in and around cities and you know, major installations, those would be what would be got first. You know, those places would be got first. So that basically is what would happen in that order. And people don't understand it because they knock out your communications first in war. They knock out your satellites. They have that capability. S-500, FK-2000, Russia and China respectively. And next, the next After they do that, then their troops, their Trojan shock troops, have mustered on their CCP regime properties inside America. They do their pre-maintenance services and checks and fuel up their vehicles on their vehicles, pre-maintenance services and checks, make sure that everything's good with their vehicles mechanically. Mechanic looks them over, either sidelines them for more services or gives them the good to go and lets them roll. They fuel their vehicles up, load up all the ammunition and everything they need for their cruise surf weapons and for their personal weapons. When they're green on ammo, fuel, food, water, like your MREs and water bottles, because they're going to put them in there too, medical supplies, when everything's green, meaning good to go, then they roll out in their formation of vehicles. And they get on the road, they jump on the road, and they go for their objectives. They start taking things. Meanwhile, people are sleeping, and everything goes off. Just like in the audiobook, everything turns off. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. Meanwhile, Trojan shock troops are on the move. A few hours later, guess what happens? Trojans start seizing their objectives fast. Meanwhile, Club K container missiles begin to fire throughout the country, wherever they're stored at. So they go off everywhere, and they hit different pre-designated targets everywhere. While at the same time, it's time to coincide with the rapid seizure of things by the Trojan shock armies going for their key objectives. Whether that be installations or, cities and key buildings in cities, they're going to seize everything that's key in a city first. They're going to take all the key nodes, airports, installations, infrastructure, cities, regime buildings, everything is going to be going for immediately, and they're going to seize it rapidly. Like, I'm talking like they're going to do like aerial insertions with helicopters, or they're going to use grappling hooks to, go through windows. Watch some of those Chinese special forces training videos. They show you how good they are with grappling hooks. Yeah, they're going to do all that and seize things rapidly, just like in my stories, my audiobook, my everything, my map battle scenarios. Meanwhile, their artillery is going to be giving them heavy support. Aircraft are going to be seizing air superiority with their fighter jets. Their humongous swarms of fighter jets, biggest combat air fleet on Earth, China. Might not have the biggest overall air force, not yet, but they have the biggest number of combat planes. That's all their active planes and their reserve planes combined. So, you have all that. Gotta stand up, the floor's hurting me. Anyway, you have all of that, and working in tandem, you have ground attack strike aircraft swooping in to offer support for the ground troops. You might even have your armed drones, like your Wing Loong drones, that China has, or, you might have Russian drones, whatever, helicopter gunships, all offering support for these invasion forces, the ground troops, as they take over their objectives rapidly. Once they've taken their key nodes, they work their way out and start seizing control of tertiary areas and other areas that they hadn't yet taken control of. So that's generally how it works. And while they're doing that, the Trojans, this is just the Trojans, while they're doing that, next comes your externals rapidly moving inland. I mean, they're trying to go nonstop. They're only stopping when they have to. Like, when defenders, happen to be in the way to throw up some sort of a defense, they'll stop and engage them and keep moving. It's like a humongous line of a rolling drive-by, essentially, because it's going to be humongous convoys of whole units coming up the major highways, stopping only for fuel, ammunition, and food and water at these pre-designated logistical supply depot bases, which are also on CCP properties that are adjacent to the major highways, strategically purchased to store massive stocks of fuel, ammunition, medical supplies, and everything else. That's how it works. So, basically, in a nutshell, the Trojans do all the heavy lifting, and the externals come in as a heavy-handed reinforcements, rapidly moving inland before fanning out to assist the Trojans deep inland. That's fourth-generation warfare, combined with high levels of technology, electronic warfare jamming, to the maximum. Like Russia and China have the best electronic warfare on Earth. They're going to be using lasers and directed energy weapons. They're going to be using robotics. They might use a limited number of nukes, not a lot, just enough to where they feel they really need to. Like with their hypersonics, they'll be using a lot of conventional, but some nuclear hypersonics. They might even use their fractional orbital bombardment. China might, and because they can hit us before we even knew what hit us with fractional orbital bombardment. It's like taking hypersonics to the next level. Meanwhile, America doesn't even have a working hypersonic missile system that's mass-produced, mass-deployed. Go figure. All our secret technology is hidden below the Earth and secret underground bases, area, like I've joked before, area whatever, Studio 54, Area 53, whatever the hell. It's underground. It's not mass produced. It's not mass deployed. It's not mass trained. You got to train people on things for people to be able to operate things. You might have like a test pilot for some new plane, but what the hell good does it do you if you've not mass trained people? Where's the AIT, the Advanced Individual Training, as it's called in the Army? Well, where's like the AIT for like the anti-gravity craft pilot? There is none. They keep all that shit underground. China has anti-gravity craft too. So does Russia. If China has particle colliders and can harness plasma energy for power, they have they have anti-gravity craft. So they have them too, but I'm sure they've mass deployed and mass produced theirs. China doesn't have a problem keeping secrets because they're a despotic police state regime. They have the MSS, which is their secret police and intelligence agency rolled together into one entity. They've also got their AI, which is the best in the world. They monitor all their citizens. They would know if someone's trying to leak secrets and they would cap them. So they don't have a problem with that. They can mass produce their stuff out in the open and probably train people on it a lot easier than we could because we got to keep everything underground, So what good does some test pilots do us for some whatever high technology we have, anti-gravity craft? Okay, we got a few of those. Okay, China probably has a lot more. So does Russia. They've stolen everything from us. You got to remember, they've got the crown jewels of the West. They've used it to build their own indigenous capabilities from it. And then they've grown from that to surpass us. And people don't take China seriously because that's Western bias. You can never underestimate your enemy, or else you're a fool. Anybody who underestimates their enemy is a damn fool. And the CCP is the worst enemy anyone could imagine. So don't underestimate them, because they have plans to take this place and colonize it and supplant you and me with Chi-Com colonists. Wei Feng himself said this. So, yeah, their actions prove that they mean what they say. The Bible, too. The Bible tells us these things are true, too. Jeremiah 15:51, Revelation, Ezekiel, a bunch of other books mention all this. Deuteronomy 28. The king and the people go into bondage in Deuteronomy 28. The king equals the ruling class. It's not just the literal king. It's a symbol of the whole ruling class. So, take that for what you will. But, Deuteronomy 28 is definitely applying to Babylon. And any other lands that behave in a manner that Babylon behaves in. Mystery Babylon. It's no longer a mystery. We've solved the mystery. It's us. It's Babylon. Ancient Babylon was taken without a fight. Okay? They just, Cyrus just walked in there and took it. He just took it. Media Persia just walked in there and took it. There was no fight, they pretty much opened the doors and let him in, and voila, you got a new ruler now, Media Persia, Medo Persia, Media Persia. They took over Babylon, and it was ruled by Cyrus. So, Nebuchadnezzar and his son were evil, so God allowed Media Persia to take them over. And, same thing happened to the northern kingdom of Israel with Assyria. Assyria took them over because they were wicked and God let them be destroyed by Assyria. America right now is wicked. It's a wicked nation and it's going to be punished by China and Russia. It's facts, biblical facts and reality facts. When your enemy has designs on your nation and people, they're going to act on those designs. Why has China beefed up their military industrial complex, everything they have, their industry? Why have they militarized? Why are they the most militarized nation on earth? With 29 million people under arms. That's their 20 million paramilitary, 5 million ready reservists that come out of the army but are still in reserve status. Their 4 million man active duty, which includes their 2 million man sized army. Why is the most militarized nation on earth that threatens to colonize America their sworn enemy, according to the Politburo of the CCP elites? Why are they not going to take us over? They've threatened to, and their actions prove it. They're beefing up their military. They're on another level conventionally from the rest of the world. And Western sources try to obfuscate all this, try to obscure it, try to blur all the lines, and they try to, make China not look as much of a threat. When I've been attacked by pro-CCP shills from their CCP keyboard army, they've had similar talking points like, oh, you're a warmonger, fearmonger. China would never do this. China's not ever going to attack America. You're making this up, and blah, blah, blah. They make the CCP look good while painting me to try to discredit me, while they paint the CCP as a positive entity. Pure evil. So their elites are some of the most evil in the world. What they do, they even do in the open because they don't care. They don't care who sees it. They don't care who sees the camps. They don't care who sees any of what they do. Their AI monitoring of all their people and their oppression of them. I mean, they just don't care. It's not like the Western elites who try to hide everything and lie about everything. No, they do their evil in the open because they're secular humanists. And when secular humanism gets hold of a regime, secular humanism means that man is essentially his own god and can make his own rules. And secular humanism always leads to atrocities on a level never before fathomable. Like your 20 million dead in the Soviet Union, your 6 to 12 million dead in the camps in Germany, or your 30 million dead in the Cultural Revolution in China. I mean, pick one. Secular humanism always leads to the worst imaginable atrocities in human history, and China is the most despotic, wicked, secular humanist regime on the planet. Even North Korea doesn't have AI to monitor all their people like China does, and they're a satellite nation of China, and they're pretty evil their damn selves, but they don't monitor all their people with AI. They don't have it. China has it, though. They have the most advanced AI. It's people just don't understand. And North Korea, being an appendage of China, is going to obey the CCP and do whatever the CCP tells them because they owe China everything. Same with Pakistan. Pakistan has had their entire military industry revamped by Red China, who's gone in there and literally built them new factories for their arms plants, new aviation factories. They built the JF-17 fighter jet together, so Pakistan could have new fighter jets to replace their F-16s, which are aging. They're still an okay fighter, but they're aging, they're old. The JF-17 that China and Pakistan have developed together, they're both, employing, that's like a 4.5 generation aircraft. The Chinese J-16 is a 4.5 generation aircraft. It's like a shortened, more compact version of the J-11, and which is also, that's a 4th generation aircraft, the J-11, and then so is the J-6, the J-10, which is like, it's similar looking in some ways to our F-16, but it's got some extra fins on the front, but they're both very good fighter jets, the J-10 and J-11, but because they're 4th generation. Even the J-82B is considered 4th generation, even though it's pretty old. But it's still a pretty fast, pretty agile fighter, but it's mainly for aerial recon or in reserve. But the main fighter jets are the J-10, J-11, and then the J-16 and the JF-17 and the J-20 stealth fighter, which are they're all 4.5 and 5th generation fighter jets, very advanced, and they have a lot of them. They have the biggest combat air fleet on Earth, including their reserve aircraft combined with their active aircraft. They have a humongous amount of combat planes, and their combat aircraft fleet outnumbers ours by 1,100 combat planes in total. And they have the biggest, well, no, Russia rather has the biggest strategic bomber fleet. If you take all the bombers they've kept in storage after, the collapse of the USSR that they've maintained as like a reserve fleet, the Russians have the Tu-16s. They have in storage. They have Tu-22Ms, which are active, but they also have a lot of Tu-22s in storage. They have Tu-95s active and both in storage as well. They also have the Tu-160 and 161s, which are brand new. So Russia has this enormous combat air fleet as well. Not as big as China's, because China's combat air fleet is only bigger than Russia's because of the number of fighters and ground attack aircraft. But China has the second biggest strategic bomber fleet, but they have the biggest fighter and ground attack fleet. But all combined makes China have the biggest combat air fleet, Russia the second, and ours is the third. But, we don't stand a chance against either nation in any type of combat, in any type of war. We're going to get annihilated, which is why the Western elites picked that country in Eastern Europe to be a proxy, because they're adjacent to Russia. They had the most professional forces that the West could throw at Russia, and they had the largest forces that the West could throw at Russia, apart from our own, but our forces are not in any shape for the level of fighting that's going on there right now, because we've not endured the amount of shelling that's been going on there since, World War II. That's that type of shelling. I mean, the Germans endured that type of shelling because the Soviets would have like 1,000 guns per mile in some instances. I mean, like, it was a lot. They would put like artillery pieces basically like neck and neck and just saturate whole areas. And they're doing very similar to that at this very moment in time. So with rockets as well, saturating grid squares with their rocket artillery, and also using their Ch1nese, their thermobaric rockets, they're very destructive. I mean, they have so many heavy weapons they're employing, and we haven't seen that type of shelling since World War II. So when it comes here, nobody's going to be ready for that level. And also the aerial munitions that would be dropped, from the two biggest strategic bomber fleets on the face of the earth. Now remember, China introduced their new stealth bomber, the H-20, in addition to all the H-6Ks and H-6Ns and Gs they have. They have so many bombers, and then if you combine that with Russia, who has the biggest bomber fleet active in reserve together, 571 and like roughly 300 that China has, I mean, you're talking about 871 heavy strategic bombers. And each one of those can carry the conventional loadout equivalent of what was done to Hiroshima. I mean, but it would be in a straight line below the aircraft, if that makes sense. They'd be dropping the conventional equivalent along that route of what Hiroshima was. It would be like an elongated Hiroshima beneath the aircraft from all the heavy conventional munitions that could be loaded onto that and dropped. We're talking, thousands of pounds, many, many thousands of pounds of conventional modern-day explosives that are more devastating than, TNT. If you're trying to get like an explosive equivalent, they're more devastating than, TNT, because, when they measure the explosive power of nuclear weapons, they equate it to thousands of pounds of TNT. You have a kiloton, which is 1,000 pounds of TNT. Then you have a megaton, which is, basically 1,000,000 pounds of TNT. So that's basically, these aircraft are very devastating in modern terms. They carry much more than the strategic bombers of World War II could, really. I mean, these are heavy weapons. I mean, and the ground attack planes too. They can carry a lot of ordnance, a lot heavy payload. And the ground attack planes, they can be used on strategic operations to hit whole areas together, like if they go as like a wing and they just hit a whole area. Yeah, they could do it, a strategic mission like that, but they're mainly there to, break off and give ground support to troops at the front. Like if they encounter enemies and they call in for an airstrike, that ground attack plane is meant to swoop down and drop ordnance or strafe as in like fire their cannons, their nose cannons at the enemy ground forces. So there's also the helicopter gunships. Russia has a lot. China's been catching up in those. I mean, like they've been building a bigger fleet now that China has this massive industrial capacity that they've worked on since the late 90s. China's built all these factory compounds, and You know, they've gotten massive. They have a lot of capabilities in terms of their military-industrial complex and their construction of various weapon systems. I mean, you know, even like, you know, military professionals, like, you know, the ones I've shared in my community tab, you know, they'll say the same thing. You know, the West has a bunch of pipsqueaks militarily, while Eastern nations like Russia and China have these massive militaries and they have this massive war industry that can support a global war, whereas we can't. We're running out of everything, and we cannot replace it fast enough. Let me see. What did Simon say? Let's see. He said something. Simon said, I am not a military guy, but Russia is using their new weapons in Ukraine, some like these Iranian. Well, you know, they might be in certain areas, but I think they've been holding back a lot. And I think that what they've been doing is that, yes, while they are using some, because certain units are going to be equipped with certain weapons, you know, I mean, that's just the way it is. You know, other units have been building up in massive numbers. Like, we're talking hundreds of thousands of troops that Russia's been building up in Belarus, Belgorod region of Russia, also in the south of, like, by Crimea, in the southern parts of Ukraine, like that land bridge area. They've been building up massive forces for this coming invasion, a full-scale invasion we're talking, not even what they're doing now, this limited incursion. We're talking a full-scale invasion. And I think a lot of those units in that buildup are they who have like even more of the newer weapon systems. I mean, but some of the units in the limited incursion could be armed and equipped with those. I mean, like we're talking like the T-90 tank and things like that. Of course, you know, there could be some units that have that, or, you know, the Terminator system and things like that. I mean, I've heard of those things already being used now. So, I mean, you know, the Terminator can either be man-piloted or robotic, you know, controlled. So, I mean, that's a pretty advanced anti-tank system. It's pretty well armed too, with the Coronet missiles and 30mm autocannons. I mean, it's very destructive. Coronet's a hell of a missile. It's already been tried and true in the Middle East. You know, Iranian-built Coronets have destroyed Saudi M1 Abrams tanks. By the Houthi militias in Yemen have used those to great effect. So the Coronet's tried and true. Of course, Chinese missiles are very powerful, like the Ch1nese that are equipped on the AFT-10 anti-tank system that's used by anti-tank units. And, you know, of course, they have the Ch112, Ch108. They've got other missiles as well, but those are the main ones I encounter when I do my reading and research. Very potent, very long-range missiles, very, very effective. Tandem charged warhead missiles that, you know, they'll use a shape charge to blow the hole through the armor, and then the main explosive is right behind it, and that goes right through the hole that the shape charge made and annihilates the crew and cooks off the ammo inside and blows the thing to shit. So yeah, Russia could be holding back a lot of their better stuff, but there's no telling. Let's see. What's everybody saying here? Sorry, I have to have this on the charger. It's a pain in the ass for me, but I didn't mean to go this long at all, but, you know, I've been talking to people and answering things, and now I'm stuck. What's that river song? Yeah, they're quite expensive here too. It's not fun, you know. These now, even where I'm at, these now here, those are almost $10. It's lunacy, total lunacy. Yeah, it's not cheap. So, let's see what else are people saying here. Can't see it. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, please hit the free like button. It doesn't cost you anything to hit the like button, if you don't mind. It's totally free. Help me fight these AI algs. Yeah, Chi-coms are definitely in Panama too. They're all over Latin America and Canada and, you know, the Caribbean. They're getting ready to take us on, I'm telling you. People don't want to believe it because people have grown complacent and arrogant, and, you know, they have that Western-centric mindset where they think we're invincible and untouchable, and we're not. We're really not. Our whole economy's fake. It's built on fake funny money, paper, Ponzi schemes, fraud, government handouts, and all sorts of other nonsense. I mean, half the country's on welfare. I mean, But yet they count that as GDP. That's counted as GDP. But even real numbers stipulates that our GDP is actually shrunk by half, like AEI.org and other sites I've been to. I can't remember them all. They're all wrote down. I said them all in the past. But AEI.org sticks out to me because they flat out say, yeah, American GDP has shrunk by half, and it's between 10 and 12 million, or 10 and 12 trillion in real terms, like real numbers. And the Federal Reserve Zone numbers that I had reported 3 years ago when they started the shutdowns to kill small business. Remember, small business had been the backbone of the U.S. economy. Small business. Any economics class in college teaches you that. Like when I'd gone to school, that's what they told us. Small business is the backbone of the American economy, and then when they did the shutdowns, they killed it, and then they printed more money to bail out, people that, shut their businesses down and were crippled by those because they didn't have enough money for operating costs to stay shut down, so they died. Their businesses shriveled up and died. That killed a third of our economy in one swift stroke. Then continually deteriorated down to half by this year. So we're at half of what we once were. Our economy is not a 20-something trillion economy. It's no longer a 23, 24 trillion economy. China's is like a $30 trillion economy in real money. When you adjust it to purchasing power parity as well, their economies massively eclipsed ours. Meanwhile we're shrinking down to like Japan size. Like we're getting close to like that 5-6 trillion number, that Japan is. Japan and Germany are pretty close in GDP. But Germany and Europe are dying because of what they've done with their sanctions, So Germany's GDP might not even be 4 to 5 trillion anymore. It might now be down to maybe 2 trillion, 2.5. Same with Britain. They might not be a 2 trillion economy. Now they might be like a $500 billion economy. There's no telling in real numbers, because a lot of the Europeans now are like, they have welfare states, and a lot of their people are on public assistance because, when these big factories, shut down due to the energy costs, what can they do? What can they do but try and get on the dole, While these Western asshat elites, these punk uber-rich elites plan on, collapsing their own economy so that they can, try and do this, illusory, never going to happen reset, because what's going to happen instead, like the Bible says, is they don't get what they want. They get an internal multi-way, multi-faction, Syrian-style conflict, and then we get invaded by the East. And the East prevails, and it's an Eastern NWO. The Western mind can't comprehend that. They just can't. They just can't fathom that China, Russia, and their 8 other strongest allies are going to form these 10 kings who will give their power to this beast, this man of sin, and his false prophet, and will reign with him for 1 biblical hour. They just can't fathom that it's going to be China and their pals. BRICS plus currency is going to be the one world currency. You watch. After World War III and Babylon and the West are destroyed, BRICS plus currency is going to be your one world currency. It's not going to be an IMF currency or any of that. There's going to be a new reconstituted UN. It's not going to be the same UN we have now. It's going to be a different UN ran by these 10 Eastern kings. China will be your main muscle, the Great Red Dragon, plus Russia, the bear. Those will be your 2 predominant leaders of the 10 kings, that have the most power. And the 10 kings eventually will suffer from infighting. It says this, they reign for 1 hour and then chaos erupts. God starts, allowing calamities to occur on the earth, and, infighting begins, and the whole one world thing falls apart. That's what leads to the battle at Armageddon. All these different forces come together for the battle. Yeshua Messiah comes down and destroys them in one hit. It's what the word says, and I go with what the word says. Kings of the East show up. That's China. And if you want to be broad about it, it's China and pals. Like the King of the North is Russia and the CSTO states, like Belarus, Kazakhstan, all that. Former Soviet republics. China, it's China, North Korea, and pals. So that's your 10 Eastern kings. The kings of the East show up. King of the North, King of the South. They have this battle of Armageddon. Then Yeshua Messiah shows up, destroys them, throws the beast and the false prophet alive into the lake of fire. And then there's the new heaven and the new earth, and whoever made it through the tribulation, through the entire thing, alive, gets changed in the twinkling of an eye. There's no rapture until Battle of Armageddon, and that's only for those who made it to the end. That's what the word says. I hate to break it to these rapture people, but, there's nothing. You have to endure to the end. The tribulation is a refining fire, like refining gold. God expects us all to do our part. You can't expect God to do everything for you. You have to do your part. It's like when, Noah built the ark and God shut the door. Noah did all that work on building the ark. God expected him to do that, and God shut the door for him. If you meet God halfway, he'll meet you halfway, but you have to do your part. Joseph harvested the grain and stored it for Egypt, and God stretched it out. You have to do your part. Shema fought off 600 Philistine aggressors with an ox goad or a spear, depending on translation, of course, whichever translation you're reading of the word. He fought them off with an ox goad or a spear in the lentil field, 600 of them, and defeated all of them, wiped them all out, in self-defense, righteous self-defense. And God never changes. If he was ever for self-defense, he's always for self-defense. Not naked aggression, just self-defense. You can't be the one that initiates anything, but you can be you can defend yourself and not be a pushover for evil. Self-defense is righteous, but naked aggression is a sin. They're both night and day. And the word illustrates all of these things perfectly. So, read your word, and God will open doors for you in terms of the knowledge and spiritual sense of it. You don't ever have to have anyone interpret the word for you. You don't even have to listen to what I'm saying. Just go read it for yourself, and God will do the rest. Like I've said, I'm imperfect. I have my own issues. We all do. Anyone who says they're not a sinner is a liar. They're a liar. Nobody is holier than anybody else. We're all sinners. We're all imperfect. But it's all a journey. It's all like our relationship with the Most High is a journey. We're all working on ourselves. We're all trying to do what we can to better ourselves. We're not trying to be perfect. That's why Yeshua Messiah died for our sins and paid the price with his blood. He knew we aren't perfect. He knew, but he just expects us to do what we can, do our best, and he picks up our slack because he died for our sins. But he expects us to give the effort to try. Honestly try. And if you read the word, you'll figure that out. None of us is perfect. Everybody's a sinner. Anybody that pretends they're holier than anybody else is a liar, and a con man, essentially. Nobody's better than anybody. I'm not better than anybody, and nobody else is either. So let's get that straight. I've got plenty of my own problems. I don't hide it. I'm right here smoking a cigarette. I shouldn't do that, of course, but hey, that's between me and God. I'll work on that. I'll get where I need to go. That's my own personal thing, just like everybody else has their own personal sins themselves. They'll work on it. They'll get it right. They just have to figure it out. It's between them and God. So it's all a journey. Let's see what people are saying here. If I can see it again. I don't know why my phone does this to me. Oh, yeah, I see you all smiles. Thank you. Just see you, though. I don't see anybody else. Well, okay, everybody. I've been going a really long time. This is a 2-hour and 30-minute stream. I really should get off. I've been on way too long. Let me just say hi to people. Cecilia. Yeah, I know, Cecilia. It's corrupt in Europe. It's corrupt everywhere, really, but there's different elites. These Western elites are ruining Europe and America, and these Eastern elites that run China and Russia are building themselves up to destroy the West because they're laughing at their rivals destroying their own power base. Because when the Chinese take over and they become the NWO, they're going to punish their rivals. The rivals will have a Deuteronomy 28 judgment. It says what happens to the ruling class. Your king and people go into bondage, not just the people. So the elites are going to have everything taken from them, these Western elites. China's going to laugh in their face, say, we're going to take all your shit, and you're going to be our slaves. You're going to go live in a Laogai. You're going to be Xi Jinping's footstool. You're going to be Xi Jinping's bitch, basically. So all these people that think they've gotten away with, robbing the people of the West and their own power base, all these Western elites that think they're getting away with something. They're not getting away with a damn thing. They ain't getting away with shit. Because it's all going to catch up to them. Because even Satan will kick them to the curb after they've served their purpose. Because what they're doing, yeah, they're making the way for the NWO, but it's not the NWO they think. It's not going to be their NWO. They're making a way for China's NWO, because they've weakened the West and made it just that much easier for China to come in and take over and build their New World Order. The Sino-Russian New World Order of the 10 Eastern Kings of Revelation, who give their power unto the beast and reign with him 1 hour. That's the NWO, the real NWO. It's not going to be a Western NWO. Yeah, we're going to be stuck with these Western elite satanic asshats for a minute. Yeah, but once they've served their purpose, they're going to get theirs. China's going to give it to them without lube. Well, it was good to see everybody, and welcome everybody. Rage Against the Machine, howdy. Tales of the Red Pill, howdy. MIC, River Song, and Bang Bang Screw Tube, and who else? Karen, and let's see. All Smiles, and Joe, and C-Mac, and who else was here? I guess that was everybody, and yeah, I guess that's everybody. Anybody else that I missed, I'm sorry, I apologize in advance, and thank you all for coming, and you all have a very blessed day. Good 2 hour and 30-minute stream. My next video is going to be my last one for real, but I had to do this one. That really rubbed me wrong when I saw that. People talking about stuff they have no idea what they're even talking about. People just going off at the mouth, spouting their opinions and trying to pass it off as fact, or even, and it's possible it could be their agenda. I don't know this person. I don't know if they're tied in with what. If they're tied in with different agendas, like, what I'm saying, like either Pogo or CCP type things, or I don't know. I don't know this person, but I know they were talking out of their ass, and they were spouting a bunch of stuff they don't understand and trying to pass it off as fact instead of their opinion. But yeah, I'm spouting straight facts because I've done the research in this area of study, and I can say with a certainty, and from my personal experience, and insofar as the military domain goes, I can say all these things with a certainty because this is what I know, and I stick with what I know. You don't see me talking about other subjects that I don't know. I stay away from all that for a reason, because I don't want to stand up here and look like a damn fool like other people that talk about shit they don't understand, So, if you don't understand something, don't pass it off as a fact. Like, don't sit up there and be like, hey, blah, 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 and not say something like, not give a disclaimer, if I am speaking about a topic I don't know, I'm going to give a disclaimer and be like, yeah, well, this isn't really my area of expertise, or I don't really know a lot about this, but, that I would say that if it came down to it, but, but in this area, this is my area, this is my niche, this is what I understand, so I'm just another man, just like everybody else, I'm not a big channel. I haven't mushroomed to these insanely astronomical numbers, and I'm not, because you have to be tied into some sort of agenda to be able to mushroom that big. Unless, of course, there are exceptions. There are some big channels that were big before the algos became oppressive. But what I'm saying is, if your channel is mushroomed overnight, after these algos have become so oppressive, then yeah, there's a problem there. You're tied in with something, and you can't trust it, So that's all I'm going to say on that, and everybody have a very blessed day. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you whenever I do my finale farewell video. I don't know when it's going to be, but, it's going to be sometime when I'm feeling up for it, when I'm actually in the right frame of mind to be able to do everything and do it to a level of professionalism that I want it to be at, to where everything is in order. I have all my visual material ready, and I have everything in order to where it'll all flow smoothly, and it's not just me, just randomly talking about what's on my mind, like stream of consciousness narration, like, like you learn in school when you're, studying like literature and, like English, like stream of consciousness, they call it, where you're just, saying what's on your mind. I mean, this was more or less something like that, where I'm just speaking off the top of my mind, But no, I want my farewell video to be professional, like well laid out, well organized, well in order, so where everything will flow smoothly, and I won't have to, worry about any mistakes or, any misunderstandings, and everything will make sense to people, and, all the topics will be in the proper order, in the way they need to be delivered. So that's what I'm going for my farewell. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope everybody has a very blessed day. Thank you all for coming.